A mother who gave her life to her 5 children ends up sleeping on a park bench, alone in the rain, expelled by those she loved most, while they fight over her house, over her money, without knowing that Catherine kept a secret for more than 30 years, and that handwritten, locked-away secret will make everything they thought they owned crumble in their hands. The gate slammed shut hard, a blunt, cutting blow, but it didn't hurt as much as her own son's words, which still echoed in her ear. "You can't live here anymore, Mum. It's not safe for you or for anyone. Don't take it the wrong way." Catherine, 82 years old, didn't respond. She just lowered her head, tightly gripping the 2 plastic bags she carried in her hands, one with clothes, the other with medicine, and an old photo of her children when they still wore school uniforms. Behind her, the gate of her own house, the one she built with her late husband Ethan, with years of work, sacrifice, and silence, was now just another wall separating her from her family. Mrs. Catherine didn't understand when her children stopped seeing her as a mother and started seeing her as a burden. But what hurt her most wasn't being outside. It was that none of the 5, Anthony, Robert, Estelle, Marla, and Thomas, were capable of opening the door for her, or the door to their hearts. As she slowly walked away down the cobblestone street, the lights in the house came on. A burst of laughter was heard from inside. They were celebrating. Catherine walked aimlessly through the streets of Charleston, South Carolina. She couldn't see well anymore, but she recognized the old trees in front of the church, the park where her children played as kids, and the bench where she so often sat with her husband, watching life pass by. She stopped in front of St. John the Baptist Parish. The bell tower chimed 6 o'clock in the evening. The air smelled of freshly baked cinnamon rolls, but her stomach had been empty for hours. "If I was ever a good mother, why do they repay me like this?" she whispered. She sat down on the stone bench, placed her bags to one side, and looked up at the sky. The afternoon faded slowly, like her hope. The neighbour, Eleanor, saw her from her window. She couldn't believe it. "Catherine, what are you doing out here, dear? Why aren't you at home?" Catherine looked down. She didn't answer. "Was it Anthony? That scoundrel again?" Eleanor crossed the street. She offered her a cup of coffee and a warm shawl. Catherine thanked her with a faded smile, but she didn't want to go inside. Something inside her told her that she had to spend that night alone. No one knew that on that very day, a few blocks down, someone else had arrived in town. A black, discreet sedan was parked in front of an old office building that had been closed for years. A man stepped out, grey-haired, wearing a light jacket, with worn but clean shoes. He took a yellowed, sealed letter from his briefcase with the name Mr. Arthur Rivers. He read it again, in silence. Then he looked up. "Catherine, if your children crossed the line, then it's time for them to know everything." Years ago, Catherine had trusted this man. She had written something that neither her children, nor her neighbours, nor even the town's priest knew. A story that slept inside an envelope, and was only to be opened if her own children ever betrayed her. And that day had arrived. What her children didn't know was that Catherine was never weak. She was just waiting for the right moment to enact justice, and that moment had begun with a gate slamming shut. Catherine was born in 1941 on a small farm outside Raleigh, North Carolina. She was the third of 7 children, but from a young age, she knew her life wouldn't be like the others. At 9 years old, she stopped going to school to take care of the younger ones because her mother had become sick. And when her father died of a sudden heart attack, it was Catherine who took the reins of the household, at only 15 years old. She was raised to serve, not to complain, to keep her head down. At 20, she met Ethan, a day labourer who worked at the wholesale market in Charleston. She fell in love quickly. She didn't have time to think about whether it was love or a need to escape. They got married at St. John the Baptist Church, with a simple ceremony, no reception, no flowers. The first years of marriage were the happiest Catherine remembered. They lived in a rented house, without luxuries, but with hope. Ethan worked tirelessly, and Catherine baked cookies and sweets to sell to the neighbours. When Anthony, the first of the children, arrived, Catherine swore she would never let him go without anything. But what she didn't know was that life wouldn't give her a break. At 36 years old, she became a widow. Ethan died in a truck accident on the highway toward Charlotte. He was in a cargo truck. Catherine received the news while doing laundry for others in the backyard. The night of the wake, with her 5 children asleep on the floor, Catherine didn't cry. She sat next to the casket with one hand on the lid and the other in her lap. She knew that from that moment on, no one else would take care of her, and that from then on, everything would depend only on her strength. She took jobs that no other woman in the neighborhood would accept, sweeping the public square at dawn, cleaning public restrooms, ironing shirts on the street. And yet she never stopped making lunches for her children, checking their homework, praying for them before bed. She got used to the exhaustion, sleeping 3 hours a night, hiding her hunger when there wasn't enough money. On good days, she baked treats and sold them door to door. On bad days, she collected discarded vegetables from the market and made stews with what little she had, but she never allowed her children to go hungry. When Robert got typhoid fever, Catherine walked more than 4 miles to get the medicine because she didn't have money for the bus. When Estelle turned 15, she sewed her own dress from fabric remnants given to her by the sewing shop. When Thomas said he wanted to learn guitar, she saved every single penny to buy him a used, broken one, but one that still made sound. And yet she never expected anything in return. In the neighborhood, everyone knew her as Mrs. Cat, the one who can handle everything. She never complained. She smiled, even with hands cracked from the bleach and feet swollen from hours of standing. She always said, "As long as my children are okay, nothing else matters." Over time, the children grew up and left. Catherine remained in the same house, with the same old furniture, with the same pictures on the wall. Each one made a life for themselves. Some came for Christmas, others only called occasionally. And with each absence, Catherine would repeat, "They must be busy. It's normal. That's life." But deep down, she began to feel the cold of loneliness, a cold that couldn't be chased away with blankets or hot coffee. One day, she found a sealed envelope in one of Ethan's dresser drawers. She recognized it instantly. It was his handwriting. On the front, only one phrase: "Open only if they betray me." Catherine didn't understand right away, but she didn't open it. She kept it in the wooden box where she kept important papers. And that night, for the first time in years, she couldn't sleep. Years passed. The children visited her less and less. Some said they didn't have time, others that they lived far away. But Catherine always defended them. Things are just harder for them now. It was Eleanor who told her one day, "Catherine, you don't realize it. Your children aren't the same anymore." Catherine didn't want to listen. She refused to think badly. She believed a mother's love was enough, that so much sacrifice couldn't be forgotten, that a child's heart always remembers. But time would teach her something else, because there was a day, an ordinary day, without warning, without signs, when Anthony asked her to sign some papers. He told her it was for her security, that the siblings wanted to help her, that soon they would all talk together. Catherine didn't sign, but she didn't ask questions either. She still believed that her children, deep down, loved her. What she didn't know was that they had already made the decision. and that in a matter of days, the door to her house would close behind her, with no turning back, and that the envelope saved in the box with that handwritten phrase would no longer be just a warning. It would be the last tool for justice she had left. Anthony arrived first, as always, with his gold watch, his freshly ironed shirt, and his commanding voice that never wavered. He sat at the head of the table, in Robert's dining room, and asked for a coffee without even saying hello. Robert appeared a few minutes later with a tense face and a poorly buttoned shirt. His wife, Lauren, waved from a distance, without much interest, and disappeared down the hall as if the other's presence bothered her. A few minutes later, Estelle and Marla arrived. The last one to arrive was Thomas, as always, with his work helmet in his hand and his clothes stained with oil and grease. There were no hugs, just a couple of nods. The 5 siblings, seated at the same table, but with an invisible distance that separated them more than the years. Robert broke the silence. "Does anyone know how the old woman is?" Anthony scoffed, without lifting his gaze. "Don't call her the old woman. She's our mother, and she's fine. That neighbor, Eleanor, took her to her house. But that can't last long." "And what do you suggest?" Estelle asked in a tense tone. "Forcing her into a nursing home?" "No, not anymore," Anthony replied. "It's time to do things legally. That's why I called you, because I already spoke with a lawyer, and we need to sign the papers so we can sell the house." There was a brief silence. Marla raised her eyebrows. "Sell the house?" "And why not?" Anthony insisted. "That house is old, badly located. It needs repairs. Better to sell it, split what's ours, and that's the end of it." "And Mum?" Thomas asked, lifting his gaze for the first time. "We'll find Mum a decent private place. None of those public places. Something good, paid for. And we'll cover it all together. That would be fair." "Fair for who?" Estelle said in a louder tone. Anthony looked her straight in the eye. "Are you going to say you can take care of her? Do you have room in your house? Time? Patience? Because I don't, and I don't think anyone here does. So let's stop pretending." Marla interjected with a fake laugh. "Look, I'm not saying I'm going to take her in, but I'm not going to carry all the guilt either. Mum is not well anymore. She confuses things, repeats stories, forgets dates, she can't live alone. And she won't let us help her. We all know it." Robert nodded in silence, looking at his empty cup. "She's right. Lauren already told me. The last time she came to the house, she locked herself in the bathroom and forgot how to get out. She was screaming like she was drowning." "And you think putting her in an assisted living facility is going to solve that?" Thomas raised his voice. "Do you really want to kick her out of her own house, just like that?" "It's not kicking her out," Anthony exploded. "It's acting responsibly. She can't be there anymore. And the longer we wait, the more problems we're going to have. The house is in her name, but she no longer has the mental capacity. With a medical report, we can manage the guardianship and make decisions." Estelle abruptly stood up from the chair. "This is crazy. She is our mother." Anthony didn't flinch. "It's a difficult decision, I know, but if we don't make it, someone else will. And I don't want them to call us one day because she fell down the stairs, or because she left the stove on." "You do?" Marla looked at the ceiling, bored. "And how much do you say the house is worth?" "According to the agent, if we fix it up a bit, about $3 million. Maybe more. It's a large lot. If sold as a development parcel, even more. Imagine what we could do with that money." Everyone's eyes moved cautiously. No one said anything, but no one firmly objected. They were all thinking the same thing, except for Thomas. "I don't know about you all," he murmured, "but that house is the only thing Mum has. the only thing she has left of Dad. Thomas, please, Marla said sarcastically. Stop romanticizing things. Dad died decades ago. That house is falling apart. Maybe, but she always said that house was for us, for the family, not for us to sell it like it was any piece of land. Well, let her say that then, Anthony replied. But I doubt it, because if she refuses, we already know what to do. Dr. Smith can sign the incapacity decree. That's enough to move forward legally. Estelle looked at the other siblings, one by one. No one had the courage to stop Anthony. I'm not sure about any of this, she said. I need to think. Thinking is what got us here, Anthony replied harshly, and there's no more time. Lucy, Marla's daughter, had heard everything from the hallway. Crouched down, with trembling hands, she had recognized every word, every intention. She didn't understand everything, but she understood the most important thing. They wanted to take her grandmother's house. She returned to the room in silence. She opened her school backpack and took out a notebook. On the first page, she wrote in her childlike handwriting, "What they are doing is not right, and if no one defends her, I will." While the siblings in the dining room signed the preliminary agreement, without reading it completely, without looking beyond their self-interest, Lucy hid that notebook under her pillow, as if it were a secret weapon. No one suspected that a 12-year-old girl would be the only one with the courage to see things as they were. And no one, absolutely no one, in that room imagined that Catherine, the woman they wanted to lock up and silence, had prepared something much bigger than simple resistance. When Anthony arrived at Catherine's house that afternoon, he held a folder with documents in his hand. He wasn't alone. Robert was behind him, looking at the floor, not speaking. Estelle was silent, her lips tight. Marla arrived minutes later, as if she wasn't in a hurry, and Thomas simply didn't show up. Catherine was waiting for them, seated in her usual armchair, the one by the window. She was wearing a light blue shawl, the same one Ethan gave her when she turned 40 years old. Her gaze was firm, more so than anyone expected to find. Anthony went straight to the point. "Mum, we need to talk to you. It's important. We don't want to make this difficult, but..." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "If you don't want to make it difficult, don't come talking to me like this is a business meeting. This is my house, and you are my children. Speak to me with the respect you owe me." Anthony stopped, uncomfortable. Robert adjusted his shirt. Marla turned around and walked through the living room, as if checking the cracks in the walls. Estelle was the first to sit down in front of their mother. "Mum, we don't mean any harm. You know we love you. But you can't be alone anymore. We're worried about your health, your safety. You deserve to be in a place where you'll be taken care of." Catherine didn't answer immediately. She slowly got up from the armchair and walked to the cabinet. She opened a drawer and took out a small wooden box. "Do you know what's in here, Estelle?" "What?" "Letters you wrote me as children, drawings, Mother's Day cards, promises. I'm never going to leave you alone, Mum. You're the best in the world." Where did those words go? Anthony grew impatient. "Mum, this isn't the time to get sentimental. This is serious. You can no longer take care of yourself. You have memory lapses, you confuse things, you become agitated." "Me?" Catherine turned to face him. "Memory lapses? Confusion? Is that what they told you to justify what you're going to do?" "It's not what we're going to do," Marla corrected. "It's what we already decided. We're going to sign the papers with the lawyer. You just have to cooperate." "And what if I don't want to?" "Well, we'll be forced to act legally. With a medical decree, the judge can declare that you are no longer in a condition to make decisions." "It's for your own good, Mum." Catherine let out a dry laugh. For my own good. And do you hear yourself, Anthony? We don't want it to come to that, Mum, Robert intervened in a lower voice. But there is no other option. Catherine walked slowly toward the door. The sun was beginning to set. Do you see that sidewalk? I've swept it thousands of times. When you were kids, I would sit there waiting for you to come back from school, sometimes without having eaten, sometimes unable to walk from exhaustion. But I was always here. You grew up here. You lived here. And now you come to tell me that I'm no longer capable of being in my own home. Estelle lowered her head. The words cut her like knives. Marla grew impatient. This is a waste of time. She's not going to agree. Then we have to move forward with the plan. Let's call the attorney now. Do you really think this has no consequences? Catherine said, now in a lower voice, but charged with something no one could identify. You think I'm old, weak, that I don't know how to defend myself. But I'm going to tell you one thing. She approached the table, rested both hands on it, and looked at each one by one. I'm not the one who's going to lose something here. It's you. Mum? Estelle tried to intervene, but Catherine raised her hand. I don't need your pity, or your money, or your empty promises. This house is the only thing I have left. I won't leave it. And if you want to take me out, you'll have to do it with the police. But you will never forget how you treated your mother. Because even if you want to forget me, I won't forget you. At that moment, Lucy appeared in the living room. She had escaped from the room where Marla had left her with her cell phone. She approached her grandmother, trembling. Grandma, are you going to leave? Catherine bent down with effort, hugged her tenderly, and kissed her forehead. No, my love, I'm not leaving. And you won't let them take me, right? Lucy shook her head and hugged her tighter. I don't want you to live with strangers. This is your home. Marla roughly pulled her by the arm. I already told you not to get involved in adult conversations. Don't touch her like that, Catherine yelled with a voice that shook the entire house. Marla stopped dead. Catherine stood up with a straight back. I understand everything now. You don't want me here. I'm a burden. You don't need me. Fine. I won't stay where I'm not wanted. She took her shawl, walked to her room, and began putting a few things in a bag. Not clothes, not documents, only a few photos, a small Virgin Mary pendant, and an old notebook. As she left, she walked past them without looking at them. But when she reached the door, she stopped and said, In this life, everything is paid for. But don't worry, I won't charge you anything. Life will take care of it. She crossed the threshold with her head held high, without a tear. Thomas appeared just as Catherine closed the gate behind her. He watched her pass, with the bag on her arm, walking slowly. He wanted to stop her, but something in his mother's gaze paralyzed him. His siblings watched him from the doorway. Where were you? Anthony asked. Thomas didn't answer. He just looked toward the street, where his mother's silhouette was beginning to fade among the last rays of sunlight. And while everyone remained silent, Catherine clutched the notebook in her bag where the sealed envelope lay. The promise no one imagined was about to awaken. Catherine walked without haste, but with a firm step, as if each stride carried decades of trampled dignity, and yet she refused to fall. The sky over Charleston, South Carolina, began to close with dark clouds. The afternoon faded in silence. No one on the block came out to stop her. No one asked where she was going. Only murmurs behind the curtains and glances peering through the windows, with a mixture of pity and cowardice. The cobblestone street she had swept so many times now felt longer. The weight of her bag was nothing compared to the weight on her chest. Her hands were trembling, but her face remained uplifted. She wasn't going to cry in front of anyone. She passed the school where her children had learned to read. She remembered Estelle with her braids, Thomas with his broken backpack, Robert running so as not to be late. Memory turned into a dagger. She crossed the corner of the old downtown square and stopped in front of St. John the Baptist Church. There, on one of the stone benches, she sat down. She had nowhere to go. Her body ached. Her legs no longer responded as before, but her soul was more awake than ever. The rain began without warning. First fine drops, then thicker ones. But Catherine didn't move. She closed her eyes, hugged her bag, and stayed there, under the water, as if the sky was crying what she couldn't allow herself to. Time passed. The cold seeped into her bones. The soaked shawl no longer covered her. The clock tower chimed 8 o'clock in the evening. The square was deserted. It was then that a familiar voice called to her from afar. "Catherine, what are you doing here, bless your heart?" Eleanor ran through the rain with a broken umbrella in her hand and a blanket under her arm. She knelt in front of her, soaked as well. "You're frozen. For heaven's sake, come to my house. You're going to get sick." Catherine barely looked at her. "I don't have a home anymore, Eleanor. I don't have children anymore." "Don't say that. Of course you have a home. Of course you have children." "Did you see what they did?" Eleanor looked down. "Forgive me," she said with a shaky voice. "I didn't know what to do. I felt anger, but also fear." Catherine didn't reply. She accepted the blanket. She stood up with difficulty and walked with her neighbour toward the house next door. Upon crossing the threshold, Eleanor turned on the living room light, cleared the dining room chairs, and made her a hot cider. Catherine sat in silence. The wet clothes clung to her body, but she didn't complain. "Please, stay here tonight. Tomorrow we'll see what can be done," Eleanor asked with red eyes. Catherine nodded. She didn't have the energy to argue. "And Lucy?" she suddenly asked. "She stayed with Marla." "Don't worry, she's fine. I saw her through the window. But..." She looked sad. "That girl has more heart than all the others put together." The cider was steaming on the table. Catherine took the notebook she had saved from her bag and placed it in front of her. She opened it to a marked page. Inside was the sealed envelope in Ethan's handwriting. Eleanor looked at it, surprised. "What is that?" Catherine took it with both hands. "A promise." "A promise from whom?" "From my husband. Something he wrote many years ago. Something that wasn't supposed to be opened, unless his children betrayed me." "And are you going to open it?" "No, not yet." "Then what?" Catherine carefully put it back. "I'm going to deliver it." "To whom does it belong?" "It's time." The storm outside intensified. The house groaned with the wind. Eleanor turned off some lights and set up a cot in the guest room. Catherine didn't protest. She had no more strength that night. She only asked for one thing. "Can you leave a candle lit for me?" "Are you afraid?" "No, but tonight, I don't want everything to be dark." The candle remained lit on the small table. Catherine lay down in her wet clothes, with aching feet and a broken heart. She closed her eyes. But she didn't sleep. Not entirely. In her mind, the images of her children crossed with the harsh words she had heard. Her chest beat slowly but steadily. And in some corner of the town, among wet streets and shadows slipping through the alleys, a man stepped out of a black car, closed his briefcase, and put on a hat. He was coming for Catherine, but not to hurt her. He was coming to fulfill what he had promised her many years ago, and the past finally was about to stir. Morning woke up slowly, with the sun barely filtering through the clouds from the day before. The rain had stopped, but the ground in Charleston, South Carolina, remained damp, as if the whole town were digesting the weight of the previous night. At Eleanor's house, Catherine was already standing before the sun was up. She had slept little, as always, but this time it wasn't due to physical exhaustion. She had made a decision, and it wasn't just any decision. At the dining room table, with a cup of cold coffee in her hands, she went over the contents of the envelope again and again. She hadn't opened it, but she knew it by heart. She remembered every word, every letter written by Ethan 3 decades ago, when he still had strength in his voice and confidence in his heart. Eleanor approached her in silence. "Didn't you sleep at all?" "Not much. I dreamed of him, of Ethan. He told me it was time." "Time for what?" Catherine looked up. "Time to wake up an old friend." Half an hour later, with her hair pulled back, her eyes firm, and the notebook in her bag, Catherine walked out toward the town square. People passed her without greeting, some discreetly, others with shame. Everyone knew. Everyone had heard what had happened. But no one dared to look into the eyes of that woman, who, at more than 80 years old, walked as if carrying centuries of dignity on her back. In front of the gazebo, a black car was parked, clean, discreet. Standing next to it, an older man waited with one hand on his cane and the other holding a leather briefcase. Light suit, hat well placed, gaze intact. Catherine recognized him immediately. "Arthur, Mrs. Catt." They didn't embrace. There was no effusive emotion. But in the silence of that moment, they both knew that something deep was being reactivated. Something that had slept for years. Something that, upon opening, would allow no turning back. "Do you have it with you?" "Yes, just as you left it. I never opened it or touched it. I guarded it as I swore I would." Catherine nodded. Both walked to a bench near the fountain. They sat down slowly, as if the past needed that time to settle. "They took everything from me, Arthur, not just the house. That's the least of it. They took my respect. They treated me like an old piece of furniture, like a burden." "I know." "Do you think I made a mistake somewhere?" "No. What you did was love too much. And that, in this world, sometimes comes with a high cost." Catherine pressed her lips together, holding back what pained her to admit. Then she took the notebook out of her bag. From between the pages, she pulled out the envelope her husband had given her so long ago. The paper was yellowed, but intact. The firm handwriting said, "Open only if she is left alone." "Here it is," Catherine said. "It's yours now. Take it to the lawyer. Take it to whoever is needed. Let them read it. Let them execute it. Let them know who they are. Let everything fall where it needs to fall." Arthur took the envelope with both hands. He put it in his briefcase and looked at her with respect. "Are you ready for what comes next?" "I've been ready since they one by one started to forget who I am." "And are you sure you don't want one last conversation with them?" Catherine looked down. Words become noise when the heart no longer listens. What I need now is justice, not apologies. Arthur stood up with difficulty. Catherine walked with him. "I'm going to see the lawyer this very afternoon," he said. "And then I'm going to see Father John. He also knows what's behind all of this. He's kept silent for years, but today he won't be able to keep doing so." "Thank you, Arthur." "Don't thank me. This should have been done much sooner." Catherine sat back down on the bench while Arthur walked away. She watched him get into the car, start the engine, and disappear down the narrow streets of the town. The air blew strongly. A flock of pigeons took flight from the fountain, as if something had been released. Catherine closed her eyes for a moment. It wasn't joy she felt. It was peace, but not a tranquil peace. It was the peace that comes when a decision is made that will change the course of things forever. That afternoon, at his house, Anthony received an unexpected call from the attorney he planned to hire to manage the property sale. "Good afternoon, counsellor. How is the process going?" The attorney cleared his throat. "Sir, I'm afraid I won't be able to represent you. I've been informed that the property in question is subject to a prior deed, and there is already legal movement underway." Anthony frowned. "What deed? What are you talking about? I've been asked for confidentiality. I can only tell you that an interested party has already started the validation process, and if the document I received today is authentic, you and your siblings have no legal right to that house." Anthony fell silent. His face tensed, his fist clenched on the table. He hung up without saying goodbye. He went straight to the family group chat. He wrote, "Does anyone know what the hell Mum is doing?" No one answered, but somewhere in the town, someone was already opening the door to Father John's office, and that man was about to pull the oldest secret the family had buried out of its hiding place. Father John kept a drawer in his desk that he never left unlocked. It was an old piece of furniture, made of dark wood with worn corners, but in that compartment he kept the most sensitive documents that had been entrusted to him for decades. It wasn't an official church archive, but rather a memory space, and among confession letters, misplaced baptismal records, and photographs of parishioners who had passed away, there was an envelope with a name handwritten on it: Ethan Miller Thomas. The father had received it more than 30 years ago, on a hot afternoon in the vestry. Ethan had arrived with a serious face and a fixed gaze, as if he knew his time was limited. They sat face to face, and without preamble, the man handed him the envelope with a clear request. "You keep it, Father, and if my wife Catherine ever comes to ask for it, it's because something serious has happened. That will be the moment to open it, and if she doesn't come, then burn it. But if she arrives, don't hesitate. Do it without asking." And now, so many years later, Arthur Rivers crossed the same vestry, with his briefcase in hand and his face hardened by the passage of time. Father John, now stooped, with white hair and trembling hands, recognized him immediately. "Arthur," he said with surprise, "I never thought you would return with this. Catherine called me. She gave me the envelope she kept for years. It's time, Father, and you know why." The priest nodded with regret, opened the secret drawer, took out Ethan's envelope, and placed it on the table. Then he looked at Arthur. "Do you know what it contains?" "Not for certain, but I have my suspicions. Ethan wasn't just any man, and he wasn't the kind of husband to leave a document like this for nothing." Both envelopes, Catherine's and Ethan's, now lay on the same table, facing each other. Arthur looked at them as if they were alive. Silence took over the space for several seconds. Father John slowly took his seat, put on his glasses, and opened the first one. It was Ethan's. Inside were 3 handwritten pages with precise calligraphy. Arthur began to read aloud, while Father John closed his eyes, as if every word confirmed something he had always feared. "To whoever reads this, if my wife Catherine has received this envelope, it is because my children have betrayed us. I write this letter not out of fear, but out of responsibility. I have lived with a truth I hid to protect everyone. Catherine and I raised 5 children, but only 4 of them are mine by blood. The youngest, Thomas, was the son of a woman with whom I made a mistake years before marrying. Catherine knew it from the beginning, but it was she who insisted on adopting him as her own. She raised him with the same love, with no difference. But the other 4, our biological children, changed. I saw the ambition in them. I watched as they grew up thinking more about what they might inherit than what they could care for. That is why, while alive, I decided to sign a property deed in the name of a third party, Louis Miller. A false name, a legal loophole. That person is Thomas. He is the only one who never asked for anything, the only one who hugged me unconditionally, the only one who, although he didn't carry my blood, carried my soul. This letter must be delivered to the lawyer along with the deed. If my other children try to take their mother's house, let them face the truth. I will no longer be here to defend her, but these words will. Ethan Miller. Thomas. Arthur lowered the letter with tense hands. Father John was motionless. "What do we do now?" the attorney asked. "We fulfill his will," the priest said in a grave voice. "This letter, along with Catherine's envelope, must be taken to the lawyer as soon as possible, and Thomas must know the truth." "Not yet," Arthur replied. "Not now. Not while his mother is so fragile. I want to handle this step by step. Catherine trusts me, and that's enough for me." The father watched him with respect. "This is going to tear that family in two." "That family is already broken, Father. This is just going to show them the cracks they've been ignoring." Arthur put both letters in his briefcase and said goodbye with a handshake. As he left the church, the sky had clouded over again. The wind was colder. On the way back, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered without thinking. "Yes?" "Mr. Arthur Rivers. Speaking." "Marla Miller here. I've been told that you're involved in some matters concerning my mother. I want to know what you're plotting, and I demand a meeting." Arthur took a deep breath before answering. "Ms. Miller, I'm afraid you no longer have the authority to demand anything. But if you want to know the truth, I suggest you talk to your mother, before it is too late. Don't play games with me, with Betteher. If you plan on taking the house from us, we will bury you in court. We'll see who gets buried." He hung up. He looked out the car window. He knew the war was just beginning, but he also knew he wasn't alone. He had truth on his side, and that sooner or later would be stronger than any lawyer, any threat, or any ungrateful child. And while the car drove away toward the law office, at Eleanor's house, Catherine slowly opened her notebook. On the next page, written in her own hand, was an underlined name, Louis Miller, and at the bottom of the page, a note that read, "Thomas must never know this until they try to destroy him." But it was already too late, because one of her siblings had already begun searching for that name. At Anthony's house that same night, the tension could be breathed like dust in a closed room. The 5 siblings met again, but this time without the need for pretexts or friendly invitations. Anthony summoned them with urgency, and they all arrived with tense faces and frayed nerves. There was only one reason. The lawyer's message had set off an alarm that none of them could ignore. They sat down in the dining room. The table, large and made of dark wood, no longer served for family meals. That night was a battleground. "Does anyone know what the hell is going on?" Anthony burst out, without courtesy or restraint. "Why is that lawyer, Arthur Rivers, involved in this? Who gave that old man the power to stop the sale process?" "And how do you know it was him?" Robert asked with a dry voice. "The attorney told me. Arthur submitted a deed. Old. With a different name. Something about a Louis Miller. The name dropped onto the table like a stone thrown into a well. No one spoke immediately. Marla crossed her arms. Annoyed. She knew that woman was plotting something. Catherine isn't as innocent as she pretends. She must have hidden documents or changed the ownership without telling us." "And why now?" Estelle blurted out, with an expression of doubt. "Why didn't she say anything before? Why wait until we did what we did? Anthony looked at her as if she were stupid. Why do you think? For revenge. She wants to punish us. She wants to see us fight. And she's succeeding. Thomas, seated in a corner, remained silent. He observed. He listened. But inside, something was beginning to boil. If a deed exists and is legal, Robert said, we're in trouble. If that house has already been donated or transferred, we won't be able to do anything. And what are we going to do then? Wait for her to take it from us? Marla asked. That house is ours. It belongs to us by right. Right? Thomas murmured, barely audible. Since when did you stop seeing her as a mother and start seeing her as a piece of land? Marla turned to him with fury. And what about you now? Are you going to defend her after everything? You, who weren't even here when we met last time. Maybe I wasn't here because it hurts to see her suffer. Maybe because I still care about how she feels. Don't try to make yourself look pure, Anthony yelled. We all have to take responsibility here. And the first thing is to fix this problem. We can't let an old document change what belongs to us by law. Robert pulled a piece of paper from the briefcase he had with him. It was a copy of the lot map, with measurements and possible divisions. Look, if we manage to regain control, we could divide the property. Anthony could take the front to sell to the hardware store. Marla, the back part, where the old rooms are. I want the garage. Estelle, you can choose what's left. How generous, Estelle said with sarcasm. And Thomas? Thomas. Marla looked at him with coldness. He was always the favourite, but he's never cared about the value of that house. Oh, really? Thomas closed his eyes. He swallowed. The words pierced him. And Mum? He asked without raising his voice. Which part of the lot are you planning to put her in? Or are you going to divide her too? No one answered. How easily you forget everything she did, everything she sacrificed. Now it turns out that Mom is just an obstacle to signing papers. Don't be ridiculous, Anthony said. Mom is not well. She's confused, emotionally unstable. We are acting with a clear head. No, you are acting with ambition, with selfishness, and sooner or later that gets paid for. Silence settled in the room again. But it wasn't the same silence anymore. It was thicker, more turbid, one that smelled of sibling betrayal. Anthony stood up from the chair. He paced back and forth. Fine. If that deed exists, we have to invalidate it. We'll get a lawyer, one who knows how to navigate these cases. We'll declare Catherine mentally incapacitated. We'll argue that she signed under pressure, that she was manipulated, and that Arthur Rivers, he better be ready. We're going after him too. You're crazy, Estelle said, horrified. Crazy? No, I'm being practical. This house belongs to us. I won't allow an old woman to snatch what's ours, and certainly not a man who isn't even family. Thomas stood up, grabbed his things, and headed for the door. Where are you going? Anthony asked. Somewhere where there's still a little decency left, he replied. And if you ever need something more than money, maybe you won't find it anymore. He left without looking back. Anthony pounded the table in anger. That's it. Starting tomorrow, we begin the legal process. I'm going to find that document. I'm going to talk to the judge. And I'm going to get back what's mine. But what none of them knew was that that name, Louis Miller, was no longer just a signature on an old piece of paper. It was an identity carefully created by Ethan, with a clear and non-negotiable goal, to save the one son he knew how to love, without asking for anything in return. And Thomas, unknowingly, was closer than ever to discovering the truth about who he really was. Lucy was sitting on the bed, with her legs crossed and the notebook open on her knees. Her small fingers played with the tip of the pencil, but her eyes didn't stray from the room door, where she had seen her Uncle Thomas leave less than an hour ago. Secretly, she had listened to him argue with the others. Words like deed, inheritance, and Louis Miller resonated in her head, although she didn't understand everything. But there was something she did understand perfectly. Her grandmother didn't deserve what they were doing to her. Since Catherine had disappeared from the house, Lucy felt a hollow in her chest that she didn't know how to name. Deep down, she had started to be afraid of her mother, and that confused her more than anything else. Marla entered the room with her cell phone in hand and a look of annoyance. "Did you finish your homework yet?" "Almost," Lucy murmured. "Almost is useless. Do it quickly and go to sleep. We have things to do tomorrow." "Mum, when is Grandma coming back?" Marla stopped. She took a deep breath before answering. "I already told you she's fine. She's with a friend." "Resting?" "Don't ask so many questions." Lucy closed the notebook. Her voice barely trembled. "But if she's resting, why were you crying in the bathroom yesterday?" Marla turned around abruptly. "Were you spying?" "No, I just heard you. You said that old woman wasn't going to get away with it." The silence was immediate. For a key moment, Lucy felt like her mother was going to yell at her. But she didn't. She approached slowly. She knelt in front of her and held her chin firmly. "Listen to me carefully, Lucy. There are things you don't understand. Adult matters. And don't get involved in what doesn't concern you. Do you hear me?" "Yes," she said, lowering her gaze. But inside, a spark was igniting. That night, while Marla talked on the phone in a low voice from the kitchen, with an altered tone, demanding something from someone she called counselor, Lucy wrote in her notebook, "My mum is afraid of the truth." Then she stood on tiptoes, walked to the hallway bookcase, and took out an old envelope where Catherine kept letters, photos, and papers she used to tell stories to her granddaughter. There, among clippings and napkins with notes, Lucy found a sheet with an underlined name. Louis Miller. She recognized it immediately. She'd heard it mentioned several times that day. She ran back to her room, closed the door, and wrote, "Louis Miller is a secret. Everyone is looking for him, but Grandma knows." The next day, Lucy got up earlier than usual. She packed her backpack with her school supplies, but she also put the notebook among the books. At recess time, while her classmates played, she hid in the school library and searched a local directory on the computer. She typed, "Louis Miller, Charleston, South Carolina." Nothing came up. Not an address, not a photo. She tried, "Louis Miller, attorney." Nothing. Then, as if an invisible thread guided her, she typed, "Louis Miller, Catherine." And there she found it. Not as a person, but as a signature. Louis Miller was listed as the beneficiary on a property document dated 23 years ago. Lucy didn't understand laws, but she understood intuition. She knew that name was directly related to her grandmother and that the adults were hiding it from her. That same day, after classes, she went straight to Eleanor's house. She knocked on the door with fear. The woman was surprised to see her. "Lucy, does your mom know you're here?" "No, and I don't want her to know. Is my grandma here?" Eleanor hesitated, but opened the door. Catherine was in the kitchen washing some dishes. Seeing her, Lucy dropped her backpack and ran to hug her around the waist. "Grandma, my sweet girl," Catherine said, with a shaky voice. "What are you doing here? Did your mom let you come?" "No. I ran away. I missed you," I don't like being there. Eleanor closed the door hurriedly. You can't stay long, Lucy. If your mum finds out. It doesn't matter. I just need to talk to my grandma. Alone, Catherine and Eleanor looked at each other. Then they sat in the living room. Lucy took out her notebook, opened it to a specific page, and showed her grandmother the underlined name. Who is Louis Miller? Catherine became still. Where did you hear that? I heard it several times. At home with my uncles and aunts. They were fighting about it. And I looked it up. And I saw that it's a name that appears as the owner of the house. Catherine swallowed. Her fingers trembled on her lap. Who else knows that you saw that? No one. But I want to know. Are you Louis Miller? The old woman shook her head. No, honey. Louis Miller is not me. Then what? Catherine took a deep breath. She looked into her granddaughter's eyes, and for a moment she thought about confessing everything. But it wasn't the time. Louis Miller. It was a name your grandfather used to protect something very important. A name that, if it comes to light, can change everything your family thinks they know. Lucy nodded seriously. And what if I help you protect it? Catherine caressed her face. Maybe you are the only one who can do it. But not yet. Not now. Eleanor peeked through the curtain. Catherine, here comes Marla. She's furious. Lucy stood up. Catherine hugged her tightly. Go out the back way. Stay at Donnie's bakery for a while. I'll handle everything. Lucy obeyed. She ran out the back door with an accelerated heart, but with the certainty that she had touched a truth no one else was seeing. Minutes later, Marla entered the house, shouting. Where is she? Where is my daughter? She's gone, Catherine said firmly. Did she come all the way here alone? What did you tell her? What are you putting into her head? I told her the truth, something you never dared to do. Marla looked at her with hatred. Her face was distorted for a moment. If you think a brat is going to stop what we're doing, you're crazier than we thought. Catherine took a step toward her. And you don't know what I'm capable of when you touch the only thing I have left. Marla clenched her jaw. She left, slamming the door. Catherine once again returned to the notebook. She opened the page where Louis Miller was written. And underneath, freshly traced with a pencil, Lucy had written another phrase. I believe in you. Catherine smiled for the first time in days, and knew that, although her children had turned their backs on her, a little girl's heart was about to set everything she had planned into motion. Robert returned home that night with a broken spirit and a mind full of voices. The meeting with his siblings had been chaos, screaming, accusations, legal plans, all centered around their mother's house. But what gnawed at him most wasn't the conflict with them, but the certainty that he no longer knew who he was. He entered the door without making a sound. In the living room, his wife Lauren was waiting for him, seated, with her arms crossed and a glass of wine in her hand. She didn't say anything at first, just watched him from the sofa, with that look that for years no longer showed love or respect, only judgment, a constant, cold, cutting judgment. You're late, she finally said, without looking directly at him. I was with my siblings, Robert replied as he put his keys on the table. We talked about Mum's situation. Your mother is no longer your responsibility, Lauren said, flatly. You already made a decision, didn't you? Well, now execute it. Don't prolong the inevitable. Robert stopped dead. He looked at her. Inevitable? Of course it is, she retorted. That house is worth millions of dollars. Are you going to tell me you're going to let it go just because your mum got sentimental? It's not sentimentality. It's dignity. It's justice. She's my mother. Lauren let out a dry laugh. Justice? After everything it's cost us to get here, after I helped you get out of debt, after I took care of this house while you tried to set up that damn business." Robert looked down. His attempt to open a flower shop with loans had ended in failure just a year ago. Since then, he lived under the constant reminder of his mistake. "We already made a decision," Lauren insisted. "The attorney is waiting for you to hand over the documents. All that's missing is the doctor's signature to declare Catherine unfit. He already knows what to write. Nothing complicated. In exchange, he'll ask you for a minimal commission, one favor for another." Robert swallowed. He sat on the edge of the sofa. "I feel dirty, Lauren. This isn't right." She stood up abruptly. She walked toward him with firmness. "Do you want to go back to living in a rented room? Do you want the people at the club to know that we're up to our necks in debt? Or that your mother, with her stubbornness, left us with nothing?" "My mother didn't take anything from us. She gave us everything." Lauren slapped him. It was fast. She didn't think about it. And he didn't defend himself. He just looked at her, his eyes wetter than ever. "Wake up, Robert. This is the reality. If you don't fight for what belongs to you, you'll lose everything, including me." He took a deep breath. Then he got up without saying more, went up the stairs, and locked himself in his room. Meanwhile, Lauren picked up her cell phone and dialed a number she already knew by heart. "Councillor Arambola, good evening. My husband is still hesitating, but I'm not. Proceed as agreed. Tomorrow I'll hand over the copy of the doctor's signature. He won't find out." She hung up. She poured herself another glass of wine and smiled to herself. Upstairs, Robert was searching for something in the nightstand drawer. A photo. It was old, faded, from when he was 7 years old. In it, Catherine was teaching him to ride a bike, him missing a tooth, with scraped knees, her with a smile that now seemed from another time. That night he couldn't sleep, or cry. He just felt empty. The next morning, Anthony had already contacted another lawyer. Marla was secretly reviewing the documents Lauren was sending her via text message. Estelle wasn't answering messages. Thomas wasn't answering calls. Each one was operating from their corner, like chess pieces without a king. Meanwhile, Lucy, from the schoolyard, was writing in her notebook. "The house isn't just a house. It's the place where promises are made. It's where you learn to love. And now everyone wants to break that." During recess, she approached her friend Karen, the school principal's daughter. "Does your dad still have contacts at the Public Records Office?" "Why?" "I need to know who Lewis Miller is." Karen looked at her as if she were crazy, but Lucy didn't explain further. "I just need you to ask your dad if anyone has searched for that name in the last few days." "Are you in trouble?" Lucy shook her head. "No, but my grandma is." In Councillor Arambola's office, Marla handed over the file. "Everything's here. Signatures, diagnosis, ID copies. All that's left is for the judge to approve it. And her mother? Let her keep playing with her papers. When the guardianship order arrives, she won't be able to sign or buy or leave without permission." The attorney smiled. "Then get ready, Mrs. Miller. We're going to get that house back, brick by brick." Marla left with her ego inflated. But what she didn't know was that, at that very moment, Arthur was delivering to the notary a copy of the deed signed by Ethan and a sworn statement from Father John. And that legally changed all the pieces on the board. That night, Catherine was sitting in Eleanor's living room, sewing the worn edge of her shawl, when she received a call. "Hello, Mrs. Catherine. This is Councillor Thompson, public notary. I'm informing you that the document your representative submitted has been validated. The property is protected under the legal name assigned by your late husband." Catherine didn't say anything. She just closed her eyes. Do you wish to begin the process of claiming ownership? No, not yet. Just make sure they can't sell it. That's all. In that case, they no longer have any right to the property. That was all she needed to hear. She hung up. Eleanor approached. It's settled? Catherine nodded. For now. And your children? Let them keep playing at being heirs. The true legacy they haven't found yet. Catherine returned to her sewing, but in her mind, she knew the worst was still to come, because the documents were already talking. But the full truth had not yet been spoken. Thomas returned to the mechanic's shop before it was fully light. He hadn't slept. The few hours he spent at home were filled with anxiety, tossing and turning in bed, and a growing feeling that everything was slipping through his fingers. Something in his chest told him that what was happening wasn't just about his mother's house. It was deeper, dirtier, more dangerous. He turned on the compressor, washed his hands with degreaser, and tried to focus on what he knew how to do. An old truck needed a brake job and alignment. The routine helped clear his mind, but not for long. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the sound of the drill was interrupted by a man who got off a motorcycle. He carried a folder in his hand and dark glasses that he didn't remove even when entering. Are you Thomas Miller? Thomas wiped his hands on a dirty rag. Yes. Who's asking? I'm here on behalf of Mr. Anthony Miller. He asked me to talk to you. He wants to make you an offer, and before this gets ugly. Thomas looked at him with distrust. Ugly? Let's just say there are easy ways to solve problems, and there are legal ways. Your name is involved in a deed, right? In the name of a Louis Miller. Thomas took a step back. His body went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. The man smiled. Don't worry, you will very soon. All you have to do is sign a power of attorney, cede the rights, and you'll receive a generous compensation. Everyone wins, no one loses. Especially you, who, well, they say, you're not even the legitimate son. That phrase split him apart. Who told you that? It's common knowledge, buddy. You knew it yourself, didn't you? Or did your mum never tell you? Thomas clenched his fist. Get out of here. Right now. Think about it. I'll look for you again. The man left with a sly smile and started the motorcycle. Thomas was left alone with an agitated heart and a question that pierced him inside. What if it was true? That night, after closing the shop, he went to the local bar. He wasn't a regular drinker, but the lump in his throat wouldn't go away with water. He ordered a beer, then another, then a shot of whiskey. By the third round, he no longer felt like himself. An older man, with a hoarse voice and a denim jacket, sat next to him at the bar. Everything all right, young man? Thomas looked at him with squinted eyes. Do you think you can love someone who isn't your blood? The man let out a laugh without mockery. If you could only love those who are your blood, we'd all be doomed. There are siblings who hate each other, children who kill their parents, and there are strangers who become family. Love doesn't care about last names. Thomas didn't say anything, but that answer kept spinning in his head. He stumbled out. The street air hit him hard. He leaned against a wall and thought about Catherine, how she always hugged him tighter than the others, how she never reprimanded him for anything, not even when he was late, when he failed out of college, when he had no direction. Why me, Mum? He murmured into the air. Why did you protect me as if you were my real mother? The next day, he woke up with a pounding headache. His cell phone had 6 missed calls from Estelle and a voicemail from Arthur. Thomas, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Don't trust anyone. They're trying to manipulate you. But it was too late. At 10 o'clock sharp, Thomas was at a law office in Raleigh, North Carolina, the same lawyer who had visited him at the shop. Ready to sign? Thomas looked at the document. He didn't really understand the terms, but his mind, still clouded by alcohol and confusion, told him that maybe this was the quickest way out of everything. But before signing, something stopped him. An image. Lucy, running toward him on his grandmother's birthday, with a drawing in her hand. A drawing of Catherine with a superhero cape and text that read, "My grandma saves me every day." Thomas put down the pen. "What's wrong?" the lawyer asked. "No, I'm not signing anything." "You're getting yourself into a legal mess. You're letting a good sum of money slip away." "I don't need it." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure my mother didn't raise me to sell her out to the highest bidder." Thomas left the law office with his chest burning. For the first time in days, he felt like he was doing something right. But what he didn't know was that, at that very moment, Arthur was discovering that someone had illegally accessed the document folder at the law office, and a copy of the deed signed by Ethan had been stolen. The dirty game had just begun, and Thomas, unknowingly, was right in the center of the storm. Estelle arrived at Eleanor's house at dusk, with a grocery bag in her arms and her heart pounding hard. She had spent days without visiting her mother since the expulsion, dragging along a guilt she couldn't name. But that afternoon, something made her get up from the sofa, grab money from the emergency drawer, and go to the market. She bought tomatoes, rice, chicken, cilantro, as if preparing a meal could cleanse what she had allowed. Catherine saw her arrive from the ajar kitchen door. She didn't get up. She didn't ask. She just looked at her with tired eyes. "I brought you some things," Estelle said, walking in with soft steps. "And I thought, what could we eat together like before?" Catherine didn't reply. She walked slowly to the dining table and sat in her usual chair, the one facing the window. Estelle took out the ingredients and started cooking as she remembered her mother doing. Simple rice, chicken soup with vegetables, warm cornbread, the smell of home. The silence between them was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was an old silence, a silence full of wounds that they didn't know where to begin to close. "And your siblings?" Catherine asked at last. Estelle sighed while chopping carrots. "They're still doing the same thing. Meetings, lawyers, plans to take the house. Anthony is obsessed. Marla thinks she owns everything. Robert doesn't even talk. Thomas doesn't answer anymore. I think something's wrong with him." "The same thing is wrong with all of them, Estelle. The only thing that moves them is ambition. Neither love nor shame reaches them anymore." Estelle put down the knife. "Mom, I didn't know they would go that far. I thought it was a conversation, a way to help you. I got carried away." Catherine looked at her with harshness. "You stayed silent when I needed you to speak up the most, and that's also betrayal." Estelle pressed her lips together. The soup began to boil. The tears, too. "I know." They set the table in silence. They ate slowly. Catherine didn't say much, but she didn't take her eyes off her daughter. Estelle seemed like a child again, looking for approval in every movement. She wanted to apologize, but she couldn't find a way. "Why did you never tell me that Thomas wasn't Dad's son?" she blurted out suddenly. Catherine slowly raised her head. Estelle trembled. "Who told you that?" "I heard it. Well, Anthony said it, and Thomas looked like he didn't know anything. Then I saw some papers. I didn't want to look, but I did. I didn't understand everything." Catherine took a deep breath. "Because it wasn't necessary for you to know. Because love isn't explained by blood or signatures. Because your father made a mistake. But I wasn't going to allow a child to pay for an adult's sins." Estelle looked down. "I treated him badly. Many times. I always thought you preferred him. He wasn't my favorite, Catherine said with a firm voice. He was the one who needed it most. And sometimes, Estelle, the ones who need love the most are the ones who receive it the least. Estelle broke down into tears. Catherine let her cry. She didn't console her. She didn't touch her. She just watched her cry, like someone watching a necessary storm. When she calmed down, Catherine spoke again. Did you come to bring food, or did you come to eat your shame? I came to tell you that I can't take this anymore, that I want to help you, that I no longer agree with what they are doing. Catherine looked at her for a long time. Then do it, but not with pretty words in the kitchen. Do it where it matters, in front of your siblings, in front of the notary, in front of the law. Because if you're going to defend me, Estelle, do it standing up. Estelle nodded with tears on her face. She stayed a little longer, cleaning the dishes. When she said goodbye, Catherine didn't hug her. But before she walked out the door, she said something that stuck in her soul. I didn't come into the world to be thanked, but neither to be forgotten. And you, Estelle, still have time not to become like the others. That night, Estelle returned home with swollen eyes and a tight throat. She took out her cell phone and wrote a message to the family group chat. I'm out of this. I don't want to know anything more about the legal case. Mom is right. The answer was quick. Anthony, you're naive. When she leaves you out of the will, don't cry. Marla, and you think that's going to win back Mum's affection? It's too late, sister. Robert didn't say anything. Thomas read the message from his shop. He felt a pang in his chest. He dialed Estelle's number, but she didn't answer. Then he wrote, Thank you. I don't know why, but thank you. Estelle closed her cell phone, and for the first time in a long time, she slept in peace. But the peace wouldn't last, because the next day, Anthony, furious, would make an unexpected visit to the Public Records Office and ask for a certified copy of all documents related to Louis Miller. But when the officials searched the system, he only found a blank screen. Excuse me, the employee said, but someone removed that file this morning. Who? I don't know. Access was authorized by a digitally signed order from Councillor Arambola. Anthony smiled. And meanwhile, Arthur, from his desk, discovered that the original folder with the deed had disappeared. The war was no longer just moral. It was legal. And it was about to turn dirty. Arthur's face was tensier than usual. Sitting in his office, he checked the files that until yesterday were complete again and again. The folder where he kept the deed signed by Ethan had been emptied. The printed, sealed, and authenticated copy was gone. The envelope where he kept Father John's testimony had also disappeared. The briefcase was intact, with no signs of force. There were no forced locks. Nothing. As if someone had entered with full knowledge of what they were looking for, and had done it in silence. Mr. Arthur took off his glasses, leaned on the desk with both hands, taking a deep breath. The feeling of betrayal was stronger than the anger. At that moment, his secretary knocked on the door. Councillor Thomas Miller is here. He says he needs to talk to you urgently. Let him in. Thomas entered with a frown and sweaty hands. I didn't sign anything, he said immediately. They offered me money. They told me things I don't know if they're true. But I didn't sign. I couldn't. Well done, Arthur replied, without raising his voice. But you arrived just in time. They're attacking us from another front. Someone broke in here. They took everything we had as backup. Everything that legally proved that you are the heir designated by your father. What do you mean they took it? And the copies? The digital ones are protected, but they don't have the same legal value as the original. They want to win by attrition, Thomas. They know that if we don't physically present that deed to the judge, they can manipulate things to declare the document invalid. They're going to try to claim forgery, your mother's insanity, manipulation. Thomas dropped into the chair in front of the desk. So we already lost? No, but we have to make the first move. Arthur took a folded sheet from the drawer. It had a name handwritten on it. Louis Miller. Your father created this identity to protect the property. This name is legally the owner of the house. But no one knows that it's you. No one except Catherine, me, and now they suspect it. Why Louis Miller? Because it's your father's middle name, Ethan Lewis, and his mother's last name. He used it as a legal figure so that if the other children ever became corrupt, you would have something secure. He no longer trusted anyone. Thomas lowered his head. I didn't even know I wasn't his biological son. But you were his true son, the only one who accompanied him until the last day, the only one who took care of him when he was sick. That's worth more than a last name. Silence settled for a moment. And what do we do now? Thomas asked. We're going to register the document again, this time with greater protection. But there's a problem. Arthur opened his computer and turned the screen toward Thomas. Look at this. This is the official search for the name Louis Miller. This morning, someone asked for a complete consultation of the file, not from my office, from the Public Records Office. Someone pulled strings. They used an electronic signature from someone with judicial power. Anthony? Possibly. Or Arambula, Marla's lawyer. Thomas gritted his teeth. They want to destroy everything. Then we'll have to get ahead of them. Arthur quickly typed and accessed a hidden file. I have a copy of Ethan's will, digitally safeguarded by a trusted lawyer in Charlotte, North Carolina. It doesn't count as the sole document, but it does as prior evidence if we go to trial. What I need is for you to travel with me tonight. We're going to certify it there. I don't want to take risks here. And my mother? She'll be fine. Estelle has been going to see her. Lucy too. Trust me. But you are key in this, Thomas. You can't stay out of it anymore. Thomas took a deep breath. For the first time, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. For the first time, he understood why his mother had been silent for so long. It's fine. Let's go. As he left the office, Thomas took out his cell phone. He hesitated for a few seconds, but in the end, he sent a message. Estelle, take care of Mum. No matter what happens. Don't leave her alone. I'm traveling tonight. I'll explain later. Meanwhile, at Marla's house, the conversation was very different. So you have it? She asked as Councillor Arambula finished a call. Yes. We went in, took the documents, and left a backup copy so as not to raise suspicion. But there's a detail. Which one? I didn't find the complete will, only a part. And without that, the play isn't definitive. Which part? The one that confirms that Louis Miller is the adopted son. What we have only indicates the property transfer, not the motivation. Marla frowned. Then invent something, manipulate the narrative, say it was a fraud, that someone forced him. We're already on it, but be prepared. If that kid finds out the truth and accepts it, you won't be able to stop him. Marla poured herself a glass of wine. Her hardened face reflected that she was no longer the same woman who pretended neutrality in front of the family. Now she was determined to erase everything that could make her lose power, even if that meant trampling on her own father's name. That night, as Arthur and Thomas left for Charlotte, North Carolina, Catherine wrote a new phrase in her notebook. When the wolves attack, the lamb must remember that it can also bite. And after writing, she hid a folded paper between the pages, an old receipt with an account number, an account in Louis Miller's name, and an amount that none of her children would ever imagine, an inheritance that Ethan never mentioned, and that was about to become Catherine's most powerful weapon. The drive to Charlotte, North Carolina, was long, though not because of traffic or distance. Thomas and Arthur were in silence, each immersed in their own thoughts. The attorney knew that this was the perfect moment to tell him everything, but he was measuring it. He didn't want to break him. Not yet. The young man already carried enough of a burden with the little they had revealed to him so far. Thomas looked out the car window. The landscape passed like a blurred dream. His fingers drummed on his pants, his mouth was dry. And although he didn't say it, deep down he knew it. He was going to hear something that would change his life forever. "Arthur," he murmured without looking at him, "why did Dad choose me?" The attorney took a moment to answer. "Because he saw something in you that he didn't find in the others. Don't ask me what it was. Only he knew that. But the truth is that it wasn't a whim. It was a thought-out, planned, legalized decision." Thomas rubbed his temples. "And you knew? Since when?" "Since before he died. I helped him draft the document, to register the name Louis Miller, to get everything ready in case what's happening now ever happened. And my mother, did she know? Catherine was the one who insisted on protecting you. She was the one who agreed to raise you as her own, knowing you weren't her blood. She didn't tell you because she knew that someday the truth would hurt. But she also knew that, if she did it at the wrong time, she would lose you." Thomas sank into the seat. A part of him wanted to get out right then, run to his shop, pretend none of this was happening. But another part, more mature, stronger, more his own, knew that he couldn't run away anymore. "So am I the owner of the house?" "Legally, yes. Morally, also. Ethan's will confirms it. The deed is in your name. And if we recover the original document in Charlotte, North Carolina, there will be no way for them to annul it. But you have to be willing to fight for it." "I don't know if I want to fight for a house." "You're not fighting for a house, Thomas. You're fighting for your mother, for her dignity, for everything she endured in silence." The silence returned to the car. In the distance, the sign announcing the entrance to the city was already visible. When they arrived at the trusted law office, Arthur got out first. He greeted the staff, showed his ID, and asked to see the head notary. They were taken to a private office where an older man with white hair and a sharp gaze was waiting for them with a sealed envelope on the desk. "It's a pleasure to see you again, Arthur. I told you this would happen someday, and the day has come." The notary opened the envelope in front of them. He took out Ethan Miller's will, with signatures, fingerprints, and registered date. He began to read aloud. "I, Ethan Miller Thomas, declare by my own will that of my 5 children, only 4 carry my blood, but the one I recognize with the title of true son, for his fidelity, for his kindness, for his capacity to love unconditionally, is Thomas. Therefore, I transfer to his legal name, under the pseudonym Louis Miller, the totality of the rights over the property located on Independence Boulevard, number 42, Charleston, South Carolina. My wife Catherine is aware and in agreement. This document shall only be made public in the event that my other children attempt to dispossess her of her home." Thomas closed his eyes. He couldn't hold back the tears. But it wasn't pain. It was something deeper, something like gratitude, something like justice. "Can we authenticate it today?" Arthur asked. "Of course, I have the authority to do so. I just need Thomas's signature." Thomas signed. His hand was trembling. His soul, too. An hour later, they left the law office with the folder locked. Arthur called his contact at the courthouse to begin the formal process of restoring the lost document. Nothing could prevent it now. Nothing, except what was already brewing in Charleston, South Carolina. At Anthony's house, the atmosphere was one of silent celebration. On the table were copies of documents manipulated by Councillor Arambola. A legal strategy was underway to delegitimize any document that appeared, claiming emotional manipulation of Catherine and fraudulent use of identity by Thomas. "He won't be able to sustain it," Arambola was saying. "It's enough to prove that Thomas is not the biological son to open doubt, and doubt before the judge is enough." Anthony was drinking whiskey. Robert was watching in silence, paler than usual. Marla was smiling. "When this is over, that house will be sold, and Mom can live comfortably in a residence. We'll give her what's fair." "What's fair?" Robert repeated, almost in a whisper. No one heard him. That night, upon returning to Charleston, South Carolina, Thomas didn't go to his house. He went directly to Eleanor's house. Catherine was in the backyard, sitting on a bench, looking at the sky. "Mum." Catherine slowly turned. She saw him. She stood up. "What happened?" Thomas approached. He opened the briefcase. He took out the document and showed it to her. "It was me. It was always me. But now I know." Catherine didn't cry. She didn't break down. She just hugged him tightly. "I never wanted you to carry this, but now I understand that it's not a burden. It's a legacy." Lucy came out to the backyard at that moment, with her notebook in her hand. "Is that what they were hiding?" she asked with innocence. Thomas crouched down and smiled at her. "That and something else." Catherine took Lucy's notebook and pulled out the paper she had saved between its pages. The account number, the amount. "There's something your father never revealed, and now it's time for you to know." Thomas read the figure. "This is the true inheritance, not just a house. It's enough to rebuild our lives, but you'll have to decide what to use it for, because this money can destroy or heal." Thomas clenched the paper, and as the night fell over the backyard, his gaze was no longer that of the confused mechanic, but that of the chosen son who was about to make the most important decision of his life. And someone, from the shadows, was already preparing to stop him. Anthony woke up earlier than usual. He had fallen asleep on the sofa, with his laptop open on his chest and papers scattered all over the living room. His eyes were dry, his nerves frayed, and a certainty was burning in his throat. The war could no longer be stopped. He got up without breakfast, put on a wrinkled shirt, and before leaving for the courthouse, he opened the siblings' group chat. Everyone was there, some online, others silent. Anthony wrote, "Thomas is Louis Miller. I already confirmed it. He's the one who has the deed." 2 minutes later, Marla replied, "How did you find out?" "It doesn't matter how. What matters is that he's using that to take everything from us. If we don't stop him now, Mom is going to give him even her soul." Robert said nothing. Estelle, from her house, read the message and closed the chat. She knew that confrontation was inevitable, but she had no idea how far they would be willing to go. Meanwhile, at Catherine's house, Thomas hadn't slept. He stayed seated at the dining table with the folder open, looking again and again at his father's signature, the notarial seal, the final phrase, "To the one who showed me that love is not inherited, it is built." Catherine observed him from the kitchen. She didn't say anything, but she knew what was going through her son's mind. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," she said softly. "It's not about that, Mom. It's about that now everyone knows, and they won't stop." Catherine sat across from him. "They are fighting for a house, You are fighting for what that house represents. Don't forget that. Thomas nodded, but his face showed the burden of someone who is about to cross a point of no return. Mid-morning, Councillor Arambula filed a request to invalidate the deed registered by Arthur at the courthouse. The document alleged forgery, manipulation of an elderly person, and, the most delicate point, usurpation of identity. Your Honour, Arambula said to the judge, we have indication that Thomas Miller was registered as an heir, using a fictitious identity, with the sole objective of taking a legitimate property from his siblings. Furthermore, we have begun a process to contest the legal paternity of Mr. Ethan over Thomas. The judge looked up. Are you saying he's not his son? That's right. We have witnesses who can testify that there is no biological tie between them, and we request a DNA test to clarify the affiliation. And the will? The will was drafted under unclear conditions. Mr. Ethan already showed symptoms of cognitive decline when he signed it. I request that it be annulled until its validity is proven with expert testimony. Who are the claimants? Anthony Miller, Marla Miller, and Robert Miller. The judge nodded. Request received. The other party involved will be notified to appear within the next 72 hours. Arthur was already waiting at the courthouse exit. He had obtained the information through his internal contacts and was prepared. He intercepted Arambula in front of the stairs. Are you playing dirty, old man? I play with what I have, the lawyer replied with cynicism. And from what I see, you don't have much anymore. There's no original deed. There's no legitimate proof. And now there's no paternity. You're messing with a legacy, not a piece of land. I'm messing with money, Arthur. And you know that. It's worth more than memories. That afternoon, Thomas was summoned to the courthouse for formal notification. Upon receiving the document, he felt all the air leave his chest. They wanted to deny he was a son. They wanted to make him disappear, again, as if he had never existed. Lucy, who was waiting for him in the car, saw him come out with a disfigured face. Everything all right? Thomas got in without answering, but on the way back, he broke the silence. They want me to take a DNA test. For what? To prove that I'm not Dad's son. Lucy was silent for a moment. Then she said, But if your heart knows, what does a test matter? Thomas smiled for the first time in days. Sometimes children say wiser things than judges. Catherine found out that night from Estelle. They are willing to do anything, Mum, even to deny you as a mother. Catherine listened to her without surprise. They can't deny what they never understood. Blood doesn't make family. What connects them to me are my scars, not their last names. She stood up, walked to her bedroom, opened an old chest, and took out a small, dark wooden box. Inside was a sealed envelope. She handed it to Estelle. What is this? The adoption papers. Your father signed it when Thomas was a baby. He legalized everything. The original copy is at the Charlotte, North Carolina, law office, but I kept this one in case love was ever questioned. Why didn't you hand it over before? Because I was waiting for them to tear him to pieces, so that he could rebuild himself afterwards. Estelle didn't know what to say. Meanwhile, at Arthur's office, the notary from Charlotte, North Carolina, called. They just accessed the system. They're looking for the certificate. They want to delete it. They've located it. And you? I already downloaded a hard copy. I have it in my possession. The digital one is gone. Well done. I'm travelling with Thomas tomorrow. We won't let them destroy his history. Arthur hung up. And that night, while the town slept, someone showed up at Eleanor's house. They knocked hard, 3 dry blows. Catherine got up. She opened the door. It was Anthony, alone. with a folder in his hand. "I came to talk," he said. "With threats?" "No, with truths. And you know what that is?" Anthony entered without asking permission. Catherine closed the door behind him, and she knew, without needing to ask, that what was about to happen would have no turning back. Anthony entered Eleanor's home like someone entering enemy territory. The gate closed behind him with a slow, heavy squeak. Catherine watched him from the living room doorway, standing, with her chin high and her hands clasped in front of her. Her gaze was not of hatred or sadness. It was the gaze of someone who has stopped expecting anything from anyone. "If you came to spit the same old lies at me, Anthony, you could have saved yourself the trip." "I came to mess with you," he replied with the folder clenched under his arm. "I came to understand why you were capable of turning us against each other, of giving the house to someone who doesn't even carry your blood." "Do you think I turned you against each other?" Catherine narrowed her eyes. "After everything you allowed, after the way you kicked me out of my own house." Anthony took a deep breath, walked a few steps, sat on the chair in front of the dining table, and dropped the folder hard. "Then admit it. You knew from the beginning that Thomas wasn't Dad's son. You raised him knowing he was an intruder, a stranger." "He was a child, Anthony, a baby no one wanted, whom your father brought in tears, asking me not to abandon him as he had been abandoned by his mother. And you wanted me to leave him in an orphanage, to reject him to maintain clean blood. It's not that. Yes, it is. It always was. You and your siblings are not fighting for justice. You are fighting for blood, for power, for property. And the only thing Thomas has done is not ask for anything." Anthony clenched his fists on the table. "And that's why you gave him the house?" "No. I gave him the house because your father and I decided it together. Because we trusted him more than you. Because he was the only one who was by my side when I fell in the kitchen and no one else answered the phone. Because he was the only one who hugged me in silence on your father's death anniversary when you didn't even remember the date." Anthony looked at her for a long time. He had no arguments, only rage, and a fear he didn't know how to name. He stood up abruptly. "You're digging a grave, Mom. Not just for yourself, but for everyone. When this trial begins, there will be no turning back." "I already know that," Catherine said without raising her voice. "And I'm not afraid, because the only thing they could take from me, they already took." Anthony took a step toward the door, but before leaving, he turned once more. "Thomas is going to fall. He doesn't have the strength to sustain this, and when that happens, you will fall with him too." Catherine smiled, but it wasn't a mocking smile, but one of pity. "The problem is that you always believed Thomas was weak, and you never realized that in his silence there was more courage than in all of you put together." Anthony left without saying goodbye. Meanwhile, at Robert's house, the atmosphere was different. He was sitting in the backyard, drinking beer and watching the grass grow between the cracks in the concrete. Lauren found him there, with a lost look. "And now what?" she asked, annoyed. "Are you going to keep that martyr face all day?" "I went to the bank today," he replied. "The flower shop loan was denied again. They blocked us because of the open lawsuit." "What? And what did you do?" "Nothing. What could I do?" Robert shrugged. "We're tied up in a legal process for a property we haven't even inherited, and the banks don't want to take risks." Lauren threw the glass against the ground. "This is your mother's fault, and that bastard Thomas." "No, this is my fault," Robert said bitterly, "for letting myself be dragged along, for forgetting who I am." Lauren didn't say more. She just turned around and went inside the house. In Arthur's office, Thomas held the adoption papers in his hands. His fingers were trembling. Not from the fear of losing the lawsuit, but from something much deeper, the feeling of having been part of a great lie, even if it was a lie made with love. "What if I can't handle this?" he asked, without looking at the lawyer. "You can," Arthur said, "because you're not fighting for a house. You're fighting for the truth." But now they want a DNA test. They want proof of blood. They want to break everything I built with her, then answer them with something stronger than blood, your actions. Thomas nodded. "And when is the hearing?" "In 2 days. The judge requested the direct appearance of all parties." "Catherine too?" "Yes." Thomas fell silent. He knew his mother was 82 years old, that she shouldn't be exposed to that kind of pressure. But he also knew that she would go, firm, without hesitation. That night, at Catherine's house, Estelle was helping her pack some documents. The older woman was calmer than ever. "Are you ready, Mum?" "I was always ready. It's just that now, finally, they are listening to me." Estelle approached and hugged her, for the first time in years. Catherine let herself be hugged. She stroked her hair as she did when she was a child. "I regret so much," Estelle murmured. "Don't regret. Fight." Meanwhile, at a downtown coffee shop, Marla was having a clandestine conversation with Arambula. The lawyer showed her a sheet of paper. "This is a medical certificate that says Catherine shows signs of incipient dementia. If we manage to get Dr. Smith to sign it, the judge can suspend her legal capacity." "And Thomas?" "We're going to destroy him on the stand. I've already prepared the narrative." "Do it," Marla ordered, "but make sure the blow is so hard that he doesn't want to get up again." The next morning, Anthony met with Arambula and Marla in an improvised office. Everything was ready. Witnesses, manipulated papers, allied lawyers, calculated speeches. But none of them knew that Arthur also had a last ace up his sleeve. A video, recorded by Ethan months before he died. A personal, intimate, unappealable testimony. A video that had never been shown. A video that Arthur kept for when words were no longer enough. And that day was about to arrive. The day of the hearing dawned cloudy. The sky over Charleston, South Carolina, had that grey tone that presages that something important is about to happen. At Eleanor's house, Catherine was dressing in the same white blouse she wore the day she buried Ethan. It was simple, cotton, but impeccably ironed. There was calm on her face, but an iron firmness shone in her eyes. Thomas, on the other hand, couldn't find peace. Since Arthur showed him Ethan's video, that testimony recorded in the living room of the house that now belonged to him, his soul had entered a whirlwind. Seeing his father on the screen, with his voice already broken but with words so clear, was like opening an old wound that never closed properly. "Thomas is not my son by blood, but he is the only one who deserves my last name. We raised him with our soul. And if my other children ever reject him, let this recording serve as my signature on his worth, because he was the only one who didn't ask me for anything, and yet gave me everything." Thomas had listened to that fragment again and again the night before, and he didn't know whether he should feel proud or destroyed. Catherine observed him from the doorway of the room. "He didn't tell you in life because he knew it would hurt you," she said softly, "and yet he decided to leave you the most valuable thing." "But I don't feel chosen, Mum," Thomas murmured, looking at the floor. "I feel used, as if my whole life had been a pious lie." "Do you think it was easy for me to keep that secret?" Catherine sat beside him. "Do you know how many times I wanted to tell you? How many times did I bite my tongue when the others treated you like you were less? And why didn't you do it? Because I wanted you to grow up feeling part of something, not like an exception, but like another son. But now I understand that you weren't just another. You were the only one who saw me." Thomas closed his eyes. his hands clenched over his knees. Then he stood up. "Let's go. Let what has to start, start." The courthouse was full. The judge, a man with a severe face and neat grey hair, reviewed papers with an expression that allowed no guesses. Marla was impeccably dressed, with her lawyer Arambola by her side. Anthony, with a frown, held a thick folder. Robert, thinner than usual, sat at the back, as if trying to go unnoticed. Estelle arrived with Catherine and Thomas. They walked straight, as if they knew they couldn't waver. The judge spoke. "Today we will hear the presentation of both parties. This hearing is not definitive, but it is guiding. What is said here will serve to decide whether the nullity process continues or closes. Is that clear?" Everyone nodded. Arambola spoke. "Your Honour, we are here to contest the validity of the will presented by Mr. Arthur Rivers. We allege emotional manipulation toward Mrs. Catherine Miller, as well as irregularities in the identity of the alleged beneficiary, Mr. Thomas Miller. We present evidence that demonstrates that no blood tie exists between him and the late Ethan Miller, which casts doubt on the entire legality of the document." The judge nodded. "Do you have documentary evidence?" "Yes, request for DNA test underway. Furthermore, we bring witnesses who will testify that Thomas was not raised as a son, but as a ward, with no legal rights." Thomas gritted his teeth. Estelle placed her hand on his. Arthur stood up. "Your Honour, we will be brief. Here I bring the original will, certified by the law office in Charlotte, North Carolina, and with a date prior to any attempt at manipulation. I also bring a video recorded by Ethan Miller himself, where he confirms his will in full possession of his faculties. Furthermore, we will present Thomas Miller's legal adoption papers, registered in the year 1986. The judge looked up. "Do you have the video?" "Yes, Your Honour." Arthur connected the USB to the courthouse monitor. Ethan appeared on the screen. Grey hair, direct gaze, firm voice. "I, Ethan Miller Thomas, declare that my son Thomas is as much mine as the others, and that my decision to bequeath the house to him is for what he has done, not for where he came from. I do it with total consciousness, without any pressure, and if my other children question it, I will only say this: the one who forgets his mother does not deserve her house." Absolute silence. Robert lowered his head. Estelle held back tears. Catherine only looked at the screen as if seeing her husband for the last time. The judge took a deep breath. "We will make a decision in the coming days, but I make it clear that what was presented today is conclusive. There is no crime in the adoption. There is no crime in the will, and by the looks of it, there is more shame than argument in this room." He adjourned the hearing. Outside the courthouse, Marla exploded. "I won't let an old video and a piece of paper take what belongs to me." Anthony said nothing. He walked toward the parking lot. Robert stayed behind, looking at his mother, who was leaving the building on Thomas's arm. Lucy was waiting for them at the entrance. She ran toward Catherine and hugged her. "You did it, Grandma. Everyone heard you." Catherine smiled. "Sometimes, honey." Silence also speaks, and this time they finally let me talk, but that calm would be short-lived. That same night, in the judge's office, someone forced the drawer where the copy of the will was kept. It wasn't a common thief. It was someone who knew the corridors, someone who wasn't going to let justice dictate the end of the story. And what was stolen that night could erase everything Catherine, Thomas, and Arthur had achieved. Councillor Arambola's office had no windows, barely a blind that was never opened, an antique mahogany desk covered in unclassified papers, and an old coffee maker that smelled more of rancor than coffee. Every move had been planned in there. every dirty tactic, every legal threat that was about to unleash. It was the center of operations for a family war disguised as a legal process. Marla entered that afternoon like someone entering an interrogation room. Her face was tense, made up to look firm, but her fingers wouldn't stop fidgeting with the ring she wore on her index finger. "Do you have the document already?" she asked, without greeting him. Arambola raised an eyebrow without stopping writing. "I have it. It's ready to sign. All that's missing is Dr. Smith's endorsement. And you know that, with the right incentive, his diagnosis is going to say exactly what we need. Dementia? Early signs of cognitive decline. Enough for the judge to doubt the validity of any document signed by Catherine in the last 5 years. Enough to open a new legal avenue and suspend her legal capacity. And with that, it's over," Marla completed. "The house ceases to be under her power, and Thomas is left hanging." "Not just hanging," Arambola said, adjusting his tie. "We're going to include a lawsuit for identity forgery. If we manage to prove that Louis Miller is an invention used to obtain illegal benefits, we can force a preventive order of seizure on the property. No one will be able to touch it until the trial ends. And that can take years." Marla crossed her legs. "Perfect. I want him to sink. I want him to see how everything slips through his fingers." "And your siblings?" "Robert is broken. Estelle doesn't count anymore. Anthony will do whatever it takes not to be left out. I'll make sure he doesn't backtrack." Arambola nodded. Then he took a sealed black folder from a drawer. "Here's the false report, ready to be delivered. The doctor will sign it tomorrow. I already arranged everything. And afterwards, we activate the second bomb." "What bomb?" "The video." "What video?" "There are rumors that Arthur has a recording of Ethan, where he explains his decision. If that appears in the trial, it won't be easy to annul it. We need to discredit that recording before it reaches the judge." "How?" Arambola smiled. "With this." He placed a printed sheet with a date and time on the table. The day the video was supposedly recorded, Ethan had already been diagnosed with episodes of disorientation. A medical doctor can testify. If we succeed, the video loses force as evidence. It will be considered emotional, not legal. Marla leaned over the table. "Do it. I want him off the map. Him, Catherine, and that girl." "Lucy?" "She's getting too involved. Catherine is using her as an emotional crutch. And that girl she's already learned to see. She looks at me as if she knows who I am. I don't want her near my mother when this explodes." Meanwhile, at Arthur's house, the lawyer was preparing a portable safe. Inside, he placed 3 sealed envelopes: the will, the adoption papers, and a USB copy of Ethan's video. He would sleep in his office that night. Thomas arrived around 9 o'clock. "Are you sure we are ready for the next hearing?" "More than ready, but I need you to be prepared for the worst. They are going to come at you with everything. And this time, not just with arguments. They are going to use lies, manipulations, and false documents." "I'm not afraid of what they say about me," Thomas said. "I'm afraid of what they might do to her. Catherine is stronger than you think, but yes, we have to protect her." Thomas hesitated, then asked, "What if I withdraw from the process?" Arthur looked at him fixedly. "What are you talking about?" "If I resign, they split the house. They shut up. Mum goes back to living peacefully. And all this ends. Do you think they will leave her alone, even if you resign? Do you think those people, after everything they've done, are going to simply leave her alone in her old age?" Thomas looked down. "Then what do I do?" "Win." That same night, Catherine received an unexpected visit. Robert knocked on the door with a small bag of sweet bread in one hand and a bottle of milk in the other. "Can I come in?" Catherine looked at him from the doorway. "You can come in if you come as a son. If you come as Arambola's partner, don't even try." Robert lowered his head. "I came to ask for forgiveness." Catherine opened the door. "Come in." In the kitchen, they shared a coffee. Robert couldn't look her in the eyes. "I was wrong about everything, Mum. I allowed Lauren to drag me, Marla to pressure me, Anthony to use me. But the worst thing was forgetting about you." Catherine stroked the hot cup. "And Thomas. He was always better than us. But we treated him as if he were less, as if he had no right." "Because they were afraid of him," Catherine said. "They were afraid that someone who wasn't blood would win my love. But love isn't inherited, Robert. It is earned." Robert began to cry. "Forgive me, Mum." Catherine stood up and hugged him. She said nothing. She just held him. But that peace would be brief. A message arrived on Thomas's cell phone while he was sleeping on Arthur's sofa. It was from an unknown number. "Your mother's dementia diagnosis will be delivered to the judge tomorrow. Prepare to watch her fall." Thomas woke up startled, and he knew that from that moment on, the fight was no longer about the house. It was about the dignity of the woman who taught him who he was. Lucy had heard everything. She had crept down the stairs when her mother thought she was asleep. She had hidden behind the kitchen doorframe, where the curtain had been hanging torn for months. From there, she saw Marla sit across from her lawyer, listen to every word, laugh sarcastically, say phrases that Lucy would never forget. Catherine is old, weak, confused. It's the perfect time. When the judge sees the diagnosis, he'll hand us the house with both hands. And Thomas? Thomas will sink into his own traumas. We'll make him doubt even his last name. Lucy didn't understand all the technical terms, but she understood everything. A knot was growing harder and harder in her stomach. She crept back up to the room, making no noise, and closed the door softly. She sat on her bed, turned on the night lamp, and opened her notebook. My mum no longer has a heart. She's just afraid that Grandma has more love than she does. Her eyes filled with tears, and without thinking twice, she wrote another phrase, one that her grandma had told her once while stroking her hair. When a person lies, it's like a broken mirror. It can reflect, but never without distortion. The next morning, Catherine was making coffee when Lucy arrived at the house with the notebook clenched in her hands. Eleanor opened the door. "Does your mum know you're here?" she asked, worried. "No, and I don't want her to know." Catherine came out onto the porch and saw her. She knew something was wrong just by looking into her eyes. "What happened, honey?" Lucy handed her the notebook without saying a single word. Catherine opened it. She read everything in silence. When she finished, she looked up and stroked her granddaughter's cheek. "Thank you for telling me the truth." "Are you angry at her?" "No, I'm sad. But not for what she plans to do, but for what she has already lost. Marla no longer has a soul, and the soul, when it rots, cannot be recovered." Arthur received an anonymous envelope in his office that same day. Inside was a copy of the supposed medical report, signed by Dr. Smith, which claimed that Catherine exhibited mental gaps, intermittent memory loss, and episodes of disorientation. Also included was a judge's order to review her health status before court experts. "This can't be happening," Arthur murmured, gritting his teeth. "What's wrong?" Thomas asked, who had just arrived. Arambola submitted the false report. He already convinced a judge. They have a date for mandatory medical evaluation, and if Catherine doesn't appear, they can declare her incapacitated for evasion. It's the move they needed. Thomas stood still. And does she know? No, but I don't want to tell her until I have a solution. What solution can there be? Only one. Arthur opened his laptop and showed an email from a trusted contact. The doctor who signed this diagnosis is under investigation for falsifying certificates in another case. If we manage to link him to that file, the judge can suspend the validity of his signature on this one. But we need evidence, witnesses, something real. I'll get it, Thomas said. How? I have a friend who works at the hospital where that guy signed other papers. I'll ask him for help. Do it, but fast. Thomas left the office without wasting time. In his mind, there was only one idea. If they wanted to destroy his mother's mental health to take her house, he wouldn't allow it, even if it meant getting his hands dirty. Marla, for her part, was already celebrating with Anthony. Once they declare Mom incompetent, we can request state intervention, and then the judge will appoint a legal guardian. That's us, Anthony. Just the two of us. The judge would never give it to Thomas, or to Estelle, who's playing the martyr now. And what about Robert? He won't get involved. He's broken. He's more worried about his marriage than the house. And what if Arthur shows up with his video again? It doesn't matter anymore. When they declare her incompetent, all her legal actions will be questioned, including that will. Anthony toasted with a glass of brandy. I never thought we'd go this far. I did, Marla replied, and we haven't reached the end yet. Meanwhile, at Catherine's house, she was calling a number she had saved years ago, but had never used. Hello, Dr. Johnson. This is Catherine Miller. I need you to listen to me carefully. It was her former private doctor, the only one who could testify about her current health. He had no ties to her children. He didn't know Arthur. He was neutral, but he respected her deeply. I don't know if I can help you legally, Mrs. Miller. I don't want favors. I just want you to tell the truth. Are I losing my memory? You have more lucidity than many young people I know. Then I need you to declare that, formally, in front of whoever it takes. If you don't, they are going to erase me. Dr. Johnson was silent for a few seconds. Send me the court appointment. I'll show up. Lucy, at her school, approached the daughter of the judge handling the case. They weren't friends, but she knew the girl heard everything at home. Her name was Camilla. I need to ask you a favor, Lucy said, straightforwardly. What is it? To tell your dad that Dr. Smith's papers are false, that my grandma is fine, that my mom wants to kick her out of the house. Camilla was silent. And how do you know all that? Because I saw it. Because I heard it. Because I wrote it. And if you don't believe me, I can show you. Camilla hesitated. Then she replied, My dad can't accept that as official evidence. But I can tell him that someone is going to come to testify, to make space in the hearing. Do it, please. That night, Thomas arrived at the hospital where his friend Oscar worked. I need a very delicate favor, he said. Is it illegal? No, it's justice. I just want to know if Dr. Smith signed other false diagnoses. Oscar searched the database. What he found made him go cold. Look at this. There are 3 open lawsuits for the same reason, and all of them match the same pattern. Elderly women, properties involved, designated guardians, and always Smith as the expert. Can you print it? Only if you promise me this won't cost me my job. I promise. I'll use it well. The next morning, Catherine received the official notification. She had to appear for a judicial medical evaluation in 72 hours. She didn't flinch. She put the paper in her purse. She poured herself coffee. She sat in her chair in front of the window. Lucy approached her. Are you afraid? No. He who tells the truth doesn't have to fear the mirror. But what Catherine didn't know was that, while everyone was preparing their weapons for the final hearing, Marla had already ordered Thomas to be followed. And what they were about to discover not only could ruin the lawsuit, it could put him in real danger. It was 6 o'clock in the morning when Thomas was woken up by violent banging on the main door of the house. 3, then 5, then a burst of shouts that made him jump off the sofa. Catherine, still in her robe, came out into the hallway with an alert expression. Lucy, who was sleeping in the guest room, also sat up, startled. "Open the door, Thomas!" a voice he recognized immediately yelled. It was Anthony. Thomas crossed the living room quickly and opened it, but without unlocking the metal security gate. On the other side, Anthony was with 2 municipal police officers and Councillor Arambola. They had papers in their hands. The older brother's eyes were burning with rage. "We have a warrant," Arambola announced, showing a document. "By judicial instruction, we have come to take inventory of the assets inside the disputed home. The property will be seized preventively, while the validity of the will and the recent documents signed by Mrs. Catherine Miller are determined." Catherine approached behind Thomas, with her arms crossed and her face like stone. "Seize? Now you want to empty the house where you were born?" "We don't want to empty it," Anthony retorted from the other side of the gate. "We want to ensure that things that also belong to us don't disappear." "Like my rosary?" Catherine replied. "Or the photograph with your father, which you surely don't remember because you never stopped by here." Arambola interrupted. "We need to enter, ma'am. It's a legal order. You can stay, but you must allow the inventory to be taken. Otherwise, the judge may issue a contempt order." Thomas turned the key. He didn't want to cause a scene, but he wasn't going to allow abuses either. He opened the gate and let them in. "Check whatever you want," he said. "There's nothing here that wasn't earned with love." Anthony entered first. He carried a folder and a list. He headed to the dining room, then the living room, and began taking photos with his cell phone. Arambola followed him with an assistant. "This sofa is more than 30 years old," Anthony murmured, "but it still works. The gold-framed mirror at the entrance too, the ceramic lamp in the hallway." Lucy watched everything from the doorframe with a mixture of fear and shame. Catherine hugged her shoulders. "Calm down, honey. The only thing they can't inventory is what they don't understand." In the master bedroom, Anthony found a locked chest. "What's in here?" "Old clothes," Catherine replied. "Your father's things, notebooks, letters, pieces of what you threw away years ago." "We need to open it." "You need respect, but I see that cannot be demanded in writing." Anthony forced the lock with a tool he carried. Inside, he found notebooks, envelopes with photos, books, and a small wooden box. He opened it. Inside, a gold chain with a Virgin Mary medal. "This might have value," he said, as if it were nothing. Thomas approached. "It's the medal Dad gave her when you were born. Remember?" Anthony looked at him sideways. "I don't need petty inheritances. I want what belongs to me." "What belongs to you, you already lost," Thomas murmured. "Not by law, but by life." At that moment, the police intervened. "Please, gentlemen, we are here to fulfill an order, not to witness personal arguments." Anthony closed the chest. Thomas took it and dragged it back to its place. "You saw what you wanted. Get out." Arambola signed the inventory sheet and handed it to Thomas. "This is only the beginning. The next visit will be with a notary and a locksmith, and they will come to seal this house if the judge deems it necessary." "Do it," Catherine replied firmly. "But don't forget that even the most skillful thief trips over his own ego When they left, Thomas slammed the door shut, turned around, looked at his mother and Lucy, and let out everything he had been holding in. "That's enough, Mum. I'm tired. Tired of fighting, of being silent, of having to defend you as if you were guilty. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to be born outside their blood, and you dragged me into this hell." Catherine didn't move. She didn't interrupt him. Thomas was trembling. He covered his face with his hands. Lucy hugged him from behind. She was crying too. "Forgive me," he said with a broken voice. "It's not against you. I can't take it anymore." Catherine approached, looked him in the eyes. "I couldn't either for many years. But I kept going, because loving hurts, son, but abandoning hurts more." Thomas broke down. That night, Arthur received an urgent call from the courthouse. They informed him that Ethan's video had been declared inconsistent as evidence due to Catherine's new medical diagnosis, which placed her at the threshold of influenceability. The judge in charge of the file had accepted the temporary challenge. "They are winning the game," Arthur murmured, looking at his cell phone screen. "They are playing with fire, and they don't care about getting burned." On the other side of town, Marla was celebrating with Arambola at a luxury restaurant. "Next week, the judge could appoint the legal guardian," he said. "And if everything goes as planned, you could be the administrator of the assets until the case is resolved." "And Thomas?" "Let him sue if he wants. He won't last. He's alone. And he already broke. It's only a matter of time." Marla raised her glass. "Let the fall begin." But just at that moment, her cell phone vibrated. It was an anonymous notification, an attached file. She opened it. It was a photograph, a blurred image captured by a security camera in front of the hospital, showing Dr. Smith entering Councillor Arambola's office. And the message read, "We know what you did. This is just beginning." The glass trembled in her hand. For the first time, Marla felt fear. Estelle's hands were trembling as she read, one by one, the letters hidden at the bottom of the chest. She found them in an old folder, among yellowed papers and documents forgotten for years. They were letters written by Catherine, addressed to someone who had never been openly mentioned in her house, Charles King. In one of them, Catherine wrote, "I can't carry this secret anymore, Charles. Ethan never knew the truth. Estelle was born of you, although he raised her as his own. I will never say anything, not out of cowardice, but because the family we have now needs more stability than truth. But if this house ever crumbles from within, you will know that it was built on incomplete foundations." Estelle dropped the sheet of paper. The world was spinning. She pressed the paper against her chest and covered her mouth to keep from screaming. The mirror in front of her reflected a face she no longer recognized. "I'm not Ethan's daughter," she murmured. "Has my whole life been a lie?" She sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling like the floor was dissolving. Catherine, as if she had sensed it, entered the room without knocking. She saw her, and she knew she had read. She said nothing. She just walked to her and sat beside her. "Forgive me," Catherine said, lowering her head. "I didn't want you to find out this way." "Why did you never tell me? Why didn't you give me the truth, like Thomas?" "Because you didn't need proof to be my daughter. You always were. You were my first delivery, my first sleepless night, my first maternal love. It wasn't your fault. It was mine. I was young. I was confused. I loved Ethan, but..." Charles appeared before. "It was a mistake. But you weren't." "Did Ethan never know?" "No, he suspected. But he never asked me, because his love for you was greater than the need for certainty." Estelle wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Then she turned to her mother. Then I don't have a right to the house either. Catherine looked at her sweetly. A home is not inherited with blood, Estelle. It is built with actions. And you were Lucy's mother when Marla ignored her. You were Thomas's sister when no one defended him. You are where you are because you chose to stay, not because someone put you here. Estelle hugged her like when she was a child. Catherine held her close, and for the first time in a long time, they both cried together. In another part of town, Marla held the cell phone with the photograph of Dr. Smith and Councillor Arambula, trembling with rage. She knew someone was watching her, but she didn't know who. She sent a message to Anthony. They are following us. I received a photo. We can't trust anyone. Thomas has us surrounded. Anthony replied. Calm down. I'll take care of it. But the tension between them was already visible, and Robert, who had remained silent for days, finally raised his voice in the family group chat. You have crossed all limits. Catherine is our mother. What you are doing is not justice. It is revenge. No one replied. But that night, Marla couldn't sleep. The next day, Thomas arrived at Arthur's office with the file from Oscar, his friend at the hospital, in his hand. Solid evidence that Dr. Smith had falsified multiple diagnoses. Everything is here. Dates, patients, patterns. If this isn't enough to dismantle his testimony, then I don't know what is. Arthur reviewed it quickly. It's enough. We are going to submit this as advance evidence, but first, I want to talk about something else. Thomas looked at him attentively. Estelle read the letters. She already knows she's not Ethan's biological daughter. And how do you know? She called me. She's devastated. But she's also determined. She says she now understands why this family was always full of cracks. No one really knew who they were, but everyone demanded inheritances as if they deserved them. Thomas sighed. And how do you feel? I feel less alone. Less alone? Yes, because now I know that I wasn't the only one hidden. We all lived with masks. And now that they've fallen, all that's left is to decide who is going to rebuild and who is going to continue destroying. Arthur smiled sadly. You're ready. Ready for what? For what's coming. Hours later, the judge issued a provisional ruling. Any action on the house would be suspended until all evidence was presented at the final hearing. That included the medical report, the will, the adoption, and now the new revelations about Dr. Smith's irregularities. But he also summoned everyone involved to a last mandatory hearing, where each one should appear with a lawyer, evidence, and willingness to testify under oath. And that hearing would be in 48 hours. At Catherine's house, the older woman closed her notebook firmly. She stood up with her cane in her hand and called Lucy. Can you help me pack my things? Are you going somewhere? Yes, honey, to close a story. The trial? No. The story of a mother who believed that silence would protect her family, and who finally understood that the truth, even if it hurts, also sets you free. Lucy held out her hand. Catherine took it, and she knew that what she was about to face would not only define the house. It would define who each of her children really was, because at the next hearing, no one would be able to hide behind the last name. St. John the Baptist Church had stood for more than 100 years. Throughout its history, it had witnessed baptisms, masses, weddings, burials. But that day, it would witness something different, a trial that was not legal, but moral. Catherine did not ask for a courtroom or a court office. She asked for the church. And the judge, out of respect for her age, and with the media pressure that was beginning to grow around the case, allowed it. The appointment was set for 11 o'clock in the morning. The wooden benches creaked as the townspeople began to occupy the seats, in silence, with the same attention with which a sermon is awaited. There were neighbours, former clients of Thomas's shop, former sewing students of Catherine's, and even teachers from the school where Lucy studied. Everyone wanted to know the truth. Father John, old and stooped, was the first to enter. He was escorted by Mr. Arthur, who carried a folder with documents and a sealed envelope. Lucy walked behind them, with her notebook clenched against her chest. Estelle and Robert were already seated in the first row, without speaking. Marla and Anthony arrived together, dressed as if attending a funeral, although they didn't know if they were going to bury their mother's reputation or their own. And then Catherine entered, not with drama, not with solemnity. She walked in slowly, with a cane in her hand and dignity intact. She was dressed in white, with her light blue shawl over her shoulders. She didn't look at anyone. She went directly to the altar where a chair was placed for her. The judge who had agreed to hold the hearing as an act of conciliation and before the final decision stood up and spoke with a firm voice. "We are here at the express request of Mrs. Catherine Miller. The purpose of this meeting is not to decide a legal verdict, but to allow her voice to be heard. After that, each of her children will be able to speak, and I will listen, because sometimes, before handing down a sentence, it is necessary to look at the heart of a family." Catherine looked up. She took a deep breath. "Thank you for coming, everyone." She took a moment. "I will not speak as a mother, not today. I will speak as a woman who raised 5 children alone, who sold food in the square, who washed other people's clothes so they could have shoes, who broke her back sewing late at night so they could study." She looked directly at Anthony. "You, son, I made you your first denim pants with scraps the neighbour gave me. You cried because you wanted one with a label, like your friends. But those pants lasted you 2 years. Do you remember?" Anthony lowered his gaze. "Robert, you cried in my arms when you lost your first job. Marla, you hid under my skirt when you were afraid of storms. Estelle, you learned to read with the old magazines we collected from the trash. Thomas, you arrived without our blood, but we gave you a soul." She turned to the audience, but her voice did not tremble. "Today I am judged for protecting the little I had, for leaving this house to the one who took care of me when everyone left, for not allowing them to sell it as if it were just another lot. But I don't regret it, because the house is not valuable because of the land. It is valuable because of the tears I shed in it." She turned toward Thomas. "He didn't ask for anything, ever. And yet, when they kicked him out of everything, he held my soul. And that's why I left him the only thing I had left, because he saw me when the rest only looked at me as a nuisance." The judge made a gesture. It was the children's turn. Anthony stood up. He walked to the front. His voice was tense. "I only asked for what belonged to me. I was the eldest son. I watched my father work himself to death. And yes, my mother struggled, but she also made mistakes. She hid things from us. She gave power to someone who is not of our blood. Is that fair?" Robert stood behind him. "Fair is not always legal, Anthony. Fair is sometimes what you feel. And I didn't defend her. And that hurts me more than not inheriting the house." Estelle walked to the front, without waiting her turn. "I'm not Dad's daughter either. I found out a few days ago. Mum hid it from me. But you know what? I never felt less, because she loved me with her body and her soul. And if that doesn't make me a daughter, then no one is." Everyone remained silent. Marla stayed seated. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her face was hardened, but her eyes betrayed something she would never admit out loud. Shame. The judge stood up. The hearing is recorded as formal conciliation. The legal ruling will be announced soon. But personally, a truth has already been handed down here, and it's not in any paper. Catherine stood up. She leaned on Lucy. She walked out slowly, while the benches emptied in silence. There were no applause. There were no protests, only a general whisper, as if everyone knew they had just witnessed something unrepeatable. Arthur caught up with her at the exit. It was perfect. No, Arthur, it was necessary. But while everyone believed that the hardest part was over, that same afternoon, an unknown person entered the judicial archive with a false warrant and took the last copy of Thomas's adoption papers. And the next day, the judge who presided over the hearing would receive an anonymous threat inside a sealed envelope. The masks had fallen. Now the final battle was beginning. Night fell without ceremony over Charleston, South Carolina. The air was thick, as if the trial in the church had left a cloud of silence hanging over the town. Catherine's name was whispered on every corner. Some said she had humiliated her children, others that she had taught them a lesson. But everyone knew one thing, that Mother was not just any woman. Robert walked alone down the cobblestone street. He wore a worn jacket, his face was haggard, and a folder was in his hand. His steps were uncertain, like those of a child going to confess a prank. Since the trial, something had been stirred in him, and he couldn't silence it anymore. He arrived at Catherine's house just as the dining room lights went out. He hesitated for a few seconds. Then he knocked. Eleanor opened cautiously, but upon seeing him, she sighed. "She's already in her room." "Can I see her? Are you here to hurt her again?" Robert lowered his gaze. "I came to ask for forgiveness." Eleanor let him pass without saying more. Catherine was sitting on her bed, folding her shawls. She had an expression of calm that contrasted with everything she had lived through in the last few weeks. She didn't look sick. She didn't look weak. She looked peaceful. Robert entered with moist eyes. He stopped at the doorway. "Mum?" Catherine looked at him. She said nothing. She just put the shawl on the bed and waited. Robert fell to his knees. "Forgive me." His words came out choked. Tears overcame him in seconds. "Forgive me for signing, for being silent, for leaving you alone, for thinking more about money than you. Forgive me for betraying you as a son and as a man." Catherine looked at him from above. She didn't move. She didn't approach. She didn't interrupt him. Robert took out the folder. He handed it to her with trembling hands. "It's all I have. All the papers I signed with Arambola, the declarations, the strategies. I hand them over to you. Do with them what you want." Catherine took them. She didn't look at them. She left them on the small table. "And what do you expect me to do with this?" Robert looked at her with shame. "I don't know. Maybe that you hug me like when I was a child and I broke things. Maybe that you tell me that everything will be all right, even if it's not." Catherine stood up. She sat next to him. She stroked his head. "I don't need your papers. I need you." Robert cried like he hadn't in years. Catherine held him in her arms. And for the first time since all this began, he felt that something was starting to mend. "I don't want your house," Robert said. "Not one penny. I just want you to remember me as your son, not as your enemy." Catherine hugged him tighter. "You always were my son. You just got lost for a while." The next morning, Arthur walked into the judge's office with the documents Robert had delivered. Among them, he found evidence of clandestine meetings between Arambula and courthouse employees. One sheet, in particular, caught his attention. A check signed by a third party who had never appeared in the process. A name stood out. Salvador Castaneda. "Who the hell is this?" Arthur asked, murmuring to himself. "He's the front man," Thomas said, entering with a new folder. "I investigated. He has properties in Marla's name and a company in partnership with Anthony. They used his signature to register financial movements during the lawsuit. Do you have proof?" "Yes, and sealed copies." Arthur smiled. "Then this is no longer just a family case. It's a criminal case." In another part of town, Marla received an urgent call from her lawyer. "We can't stop him, Marla. Arthur already submitted the documents. The judge is reconsidering everything. He summoned us tomorrow as a matter of urgency. This time, there's no way to manipulate the hearing. And what if we don't show up? It would be worse. They could issue a contempt order or open a file for obstruction of justice." Marla hung up without saying goodbye. She grabbed her purse, got in her car, and drove aimlessly. She was tired, exhausted, internally defeated, even though she wouldn't admit it. She ended up parked in front of Lucy's school. From a distance, she saw her daughter leave with her classmates. She was walking, smiling, with the notebook against her chest, a notebook that held more truth than all the trial files. And for the first time, Marla thought about leaving. That night, Lucy wrote, "Sometimes what hurts the most isn't what they take from us, but what we stop seeing while we fight to be right." And while everyone was sleeping, an anonymous email arrived in the official court account. It attached an audio file, a recording between Arambula and a corrupt official, and a phrase that summed up everything. "It doesn't matter if the woman is right. This is already a business, not a lawsuit." The judge listened to everything, and the next day he summoned all those involved. For the last time, the truth was about to erupt, and no one would leave unscathed. The morning began with an unusual silence at Catherine's house. Neither the singing of the birds nor the murmur of the wind managed to slip through the cracks in the windows. Everything was still, as if time had stopped to hold its breath for the inevitable. Lucy was the first to notice. She entered her grandmother's room with a cup of tea in her hands, as she had done every morning for weeks. But Catherine was not seated in her armchair, nor fixing her hair in front of the mirror, nor writing in her notebook. She was on the floor, lying on her side, with her arm outstretched and her eyes open but disoriented. "Grandma!" Lucy screamed, dropping the cup that shattered on the floor. The noise made Eleanor run from the kitchen. "Catherine!" she exclaimed, kneeling beside her. "Thomas!" Lucy screamed toward the back of the house. "Something happened to my grandma!" Thomas arrived in seconds. He knelt beside her. He took her pulse. He caressed her cheek. Mum, I'm here. Talk to me. Can you hear me?" Catherine tried to move her lips, but she couldn't. She only let out a faint moan. Her fingers barely moved. Her eyes tried to focus on her son, but her strength was escaping her body. "We have to take her to the hospital now," Thomas said. At the General Hospital, the news spread quickly through the corridors. Catherine Miller, 83 years old, admitted for fainting, low blood pressure, and possible minor stroke. She was taken directly to the emergency room. Thomas and Lucy waited outside, trembling. "Why did this happen to her?" Lucy asked with swollen eyes. Thomas hugged her tightly. "Because the body holds up, but the soul gets tired too." Dr. Johnson arrived 20 minutes later. He had been notified by Arthur. "How is she?" Thomas asked as soon as he saw him enter. "Stable, but very weak. She's conscious at times, but she can't maintain a coherent thought. She's not in immediate danger, but she must remain under observation." Can she receive visitors? Only you and Lucy. The rest, not for now. Inside the room, Catherine lay connected to several wires with oxygen and her face paler than ever. But when Thomas entered, she slightly opened her eyes. She recognized him. She smiled with difficulty. Mum. Catherine stretched out her hand. Thomas took it. Please forgive me, he said with a broken voice. You shouldn't have carried all this. I should have protected you better. She barely moved her lips. You did. You were always there. Lucy entered too. She approached the bed. Grandma, are you going to get well? Catherine looked at her and stroked her head. I don't know, but if I don't get well, I've already done what I had to do. Thomas looked at her with pain. What else do you want us to do? Finish what we started. Convert that house into something more. How? I don't want it for myself anymore. I want it to serve those who never had anything, for the old folks who were thrown out like me, for the ones no one visits anymore. Thomas felt his heart clench in his chest. You want us to make a home? Catherine nodded. A shelter, a place where the forgotten feel like people again. Lucy picked up the notebook from the small table. On the last page, Catherine had written, The house they denied me will become a home for those who don't have one. Where they called me a nuisance, clean beds and tables with bread will be set up. May my old age not be repeated in others. Meanwhile, at Marla's house, everything was chaos. The news had arrived. What do you mean she's hospitalized? She screamed into the phone. And why didn't you tell me? You handed her over, Estelle said, who was on the other end of the line. Because neither her bed nor her name belongs to you anymore. Marla hung up with fury. She went to her room, opened the closet, took out a suitcase. Anthony found her minutes later hastily packing clothes. What are you doing? I'm leaving. Where to? I don't know, but I'm not going to stay and watch Mum die while everyone blames me. Are you running away? I'm tired, Anthony. You keep fighting if you want. I don't have the stomach for this anymore. At the hospital, Thomas left the room with dry tears in his eyes. Arthur was waiting for him in the hallway. How is she? She said she wants us to make an elder care home with the house, to turn it into a shelter for the forgotten. Are you going to do it? It's the only thing that makes sense to me now. Then let's begin. We already have the legal battle won. All that's left is for your mother to see, even once, that place standing. Thomas nodded. We're going to do it. And we're going to call it... What should it be called? Arthur looked at him with pride. Ethan's home. Thomas shook his head. No. Lucy approached and said it first. Catherine's house. And the three of them smiled. But as they were about to leave the hospital to begin the paperwork, a nurse came running. Mr. Thomas, Mrs. Miller has had a relapse. He ran toward the room, and upon arriving, he found his mother unconscious, monitors blaring, nurses rushing in, and he knew he didn't have time. What she had asked for had to be done now or never. The sound of the heart monitor marked each second with cruel precision. Beep, beep, beep. And with each beep, Thomas felt time slipping through his fingers. Catherine remained unconscious. Her face was pale, almost translucent, but calm, as if her body knew it had fulfilled everything life had entrusted her with. Lucy didn't move from the corner near the window. She had the notebook in her hands, open to the page where Catherine wrote her last wish, to convert the house into a home for the forgotten. What if she doesn't wake up, Thomas? Lucy asked in a low voice, almost breathless. What are we going to do if she never talks to us again? Thomas looked at her, unable to answer. There was no way to know. Not even Dr. Johnson dared to promise anything. He only recommended to wait, watch, and keep her surrounded by everything that connected her with what she loved. "We can read to her," Thomas said. "We can talk to her. Maybe her body isn't responding, but her soul always listens." Lucy stood up. She approached the bed. She opened the notebook to another page, one where she herself had written, weeks ago. "Grandma, you're not old. You are the root, and without the root, the house falls down." She read it aloud, and upon finishing, she gently took her hand. Outside the room, Arthur held an envelope in his hands, an envelope that Catherine had given him a while ago, and asked him not to open until he felt the moment demanded it. "Is it time?" Estelle asked, who arrived silently with a worn but serene face. She said that when everything was at risk, this envelope should come to light. Arthur opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, with Catherine's firm script. "If this letter is opened, it's because I can no longer say what is left on my tongue. To you, Thomas, my soul's son. You did not inherit my blood, but you were my breath. You do not carry my genes, but you carry my history. To you I give not the house, but the responsibility that it does not become what your siblings wanted, a spoil of war. You have lived long enough as a secret. Now it is your turn to live as who you are. And if you ever doubt why it was you, go to the kitchen. Look behind the wall where we hung the keys. There is your father's letter, the original, the one no one has read, the one he did not want to hand over to the courts. That letter is yours, and yours alone." Arthur said nothing. He only closed the envelope and put it away again. "What did it say?" Estelle asked. "The necessary." That afternoon, Thomas returned home. He was alone. He opened the door with trembling hands. He walked slowly to the kitchen. He looked toward the wall where the gate keys hung for years. There was a small crack, barely visible. Thomas felt around with his fingers until he felt a slight unevenness. He pushed carefully. Behind the hidden wall between a false board, he found a small metallic box, dust, oxidation, and inside a precisely folded sheet of paper. He unfolded it. It was Ethan's handwriting, his father's. "Thomas, I didn't know how to tell you in life. It was hard for me to look you in the eyes without thinking about my mistakes. I loved you from the first day Catherine put you in my arms. But I also failed you, because silence weighs heavily, and you carried that silence without knowing it. You were a better son than anyone, a better man than me. I chose you because you were the only one who, without asking for anything, gave everything. The house is yours, not because I signed it over, but because you filled it with dignity when the others filled it with greed. Forgive me for not telling you this sooner, but if you are reading it, it is because you are already stronger than me. With eternal pride, Dad." Thomas fell to his knees. Silent tears ran down his face. Upon getting up, he wiped his face and went out to the backyard. There, in front of the old lemon tree his mother had planted when he was a child, he promised aloud, "You won't die with this house, Mum. You'll live in every person who comes to it looking for shelter, in every rejected elderly person, in every tired voice, in every trembling hand that touches that door." He returned to the hospital. Lucy was sleeping in a chair. Catherine, still connected to machines, remained motionless. Thomas approached. "I found Dad's letter," he whispered to her, "and it made me understand everything. I'm not an inheritance, I'm a purpose, and I swear I'm going to fulfill it." He kissed her forehead. And then Catherine opened her eyes, slow, but alive. She looked at him, smiled, and said, barely audible. "I knew you'd find it," and closed her eyes again, this time with peace. But the monitor didn't stop beeping. She was still there, resisting, as she always did. And now, the house already had a name, and a future too. Only one decision was missing, the one to forgive. The atmosphere in the hospital was thick. The dim lights, the silent corridors, and the muffled voices of the nurses made it seem more like a temple than a medical center. In room 208, Catherine rested, connected to the devices that sustained her body, but not her soul. That remained intact, firm, awake. Estelle was the first to enter that afternoon. She carried a bag of sweet bread and a jar of hand cream. She walked slowly, as if the air was heavy. Sitting next to her mother's bed hurt her more than the truths she had read weeks earlier. "Mum," she murmured, "I'm here." Catherine looked at her, barely with her eyes open. She nodded with a slight smile. Estelle took her hand and began to apply the cream, just like when she was a child and Catherine would heal her winter cracks. "Forgive me for not understanding sooner what you were doing, for failing you so many times in silence, for not being able to see you as a woman, in addition to a mother." Catherine didn't respond. She only squeezed her hand with weakness. Robert came too. He knelt. He cried. "Thomas is transforming everything. He already started the home project. He's going to put your name on the entrance. And Lucy is taking care of you more than all of us put together." A couple of tears rolled down Estelle's cheeks. "But there's someone who hasn't come, Mum, and I don't know if she will." Catherine sighed. She said nothing. She closed her eyes for a few seconds. When she opened them, she looked at Lucy, who had just entered with her notebook in her arms. "How are you this morning, Grandma?" "A little less strong, honey." Lucy approached, kissed her forehead, and sat at her feet. "Can I read something to you?" "Of course." Lucy opened the notebook and looked for a page marked with a star. She began to read. "Family is not who inherits. It's who stays when everything breaks. It's who cleans up the pieces, even if they weren't the one who broke them. Family is who holds on, even when their legs are trembling." Catherine smiled. She looked at Estelle, then at Lucy. "I don't lack anything," she said softly. "Only one thing." "What?" "That Marla comes." But Marla didn't come. She was at her house, sitting in front of the turned-off television with a closed suitcase at her feet. She had her cell phone in her hand and the hospital notification open for an hour. She had read it 5 times. Condition: critical. Patient stable, but with previous relapse. Possible multi-organ failure if no improvement in the next few hours. She couldn't move her fingers to dial. She couldn't say a single word, because inside her, pride was still fighting with guilt, and pride, like a parasite, was stronger. Anthony had sent her a message that same morning. "No point in going, everything has already been said." But Marla knew that was not true, that not everything had been said. It was just that she didn't dare to say it. In the hospital room, Catherine began to speak with more difficulty. The nurse increased her oxygen flow. Thomas entered minutes later. He carried a small box wrapped in a handkerchief. "Mum, here's what Dad wrote, what you saved for so many years." Catherine nodded. Thomas opened the box, took out the letter, and began to read it aloud. When he reached the end, where Ethan said, "I chose you because you never asked me for anything, only love," Catherine shed a tear. "Then it's settled," she said. "What is settled?" Lucy asked. "I have nothing left to say, or to write, or to hide." Estelle adjusted the shawl over her shoulders. Are you tired? I'm at peace. At 10 o'clock that night, a letter arrived at the hospital. It was unsigned, but the reception staff knew who it was from. They left it on the nightstand in the room without saying anything. Lucy took it. She read it in silence. Then she put it away. Thomas asked, "What does it say?" Lucy hesitated. "I don't know if I should." "Say it." Lucy opened the letter. "Catherine, I didn't dare to go, because I'm afraid to look at you and see in your eyes everything I didn't want to be. I lost the right to call myself your daughter. But if I have a little soul left, it's thanks to you. I wish life gives me time to do something good with what I learned from you, even if I learned it late. Forgive me. Marla." Catherine closed her eyes. She didn't cry. She only said, "Now yes, I'm ready." Estelle adjusted the blanket. Lucy turned off the light, and Thomas whispered in a barely audible voice, "Tomorrow we will tell the world what you did, and no one can take that away from you." But Catherine no longer responded. She slept. And although she was still breathing, she was preparing, in silence, to say goodbye. And the others, also in silence, began to prepare the house for what was to come. The day dawned indifferently, not because of the weather, which was still cold and grey as it had been for weeks, nor because of the town's routine, which continued its course among markets, horns, and bells. What had changed was the air, the silence, the way the wind brushed the windows. Charleston, South Carolina, woke up with an absence it couldn't explain. Catherine Miller had died at 4 o'clock, 27 minutes after midnight. The nurse who was with her at that moment, a young woman who barely knew her, assured that there was no pain, no surprise, no crying, only a soft exhale, as if she was finally letting go of the last breath she had been holding since they kicked her out of her house with 2 bags in her hand. When the monitor showed a straight line, Lucy woke up immediately. She felt the change before the alarm sounded. She ran to the room and threw herself onto her grandmother's body. She hugged her tightly without screaming, without talking. She only held her, as she had held her so many times. Thomas arrived minutes later. There were no words. He caressed her face. He adjusted her shawl. He kissed her forehead. "Rest, Mum," he murmured. "You did everything." The funeral was simple, just as Catherine had requested. A discreet service, white flowers, lit candles, and the old portrait Ethan took of her in the backyard, when she still had dark hair and eyes full of fire. Thomas organized everything. Estelle helped with the calls. Robert, silent, carried the casket with Arthur and other neighbours. There were no public speeches, only prayers, tears, sighs. Marla didn't show up. Anthony didn't either. But Lucy, in her black dress and her notebook against her chest, approached the altar when the service ended. She stood in front of everyone and read, without trembling, the last page she wrote that morning. My grandma wasn't perfect, but she was brave. My grandma didn't leave riches, but she taught us not to lose our soul. My grandma didn't have titles, but she knew how to educate without telling us what to do, and when the world turned its back on her, she relied on herself. She taught us that love is not demanded, it is demonstrated, and that when everyone forgets you, you can choose not to forget yourself. Lucy closed the notebook, walked to the casket. She left a white flower on top and a piece of paper with the drawing she made of her as a child, Catherine with a cape, like a heroine. Goodbye, Grandma, but not forever. After the burial, Thomas stayed alone next to the gravestone. He wasn't crying. He had no tears left. What he felt now was clarity, a different calm, a certainty that grew in his chest like a fertile seed. Estelle approached with a blanket. placed it over his shoulders. "Are you okay?" "No, but I will be." "What are you going to do now?" Thomas looked at her. What she asked for, what she asked of all of us. Catherine's house? Catherine's house! Estelle hugged him, not as a sister, not as a child of the same mother. She hugged him as real family, as someone who understands that love, when it's true, transcends everything. That night, Lucy opened the notebook in the middle, pasted a photo of Catherine sitting in the backyard, knitting, with the sun lighting her face, and wrote underneath, "A home is not a place where you live, it's a place where you can always return. And you made your body, your voice, and your example that home for all of us. Thank you, Grandma, for not giving up, for loving in silence, and for teaching us that the end can also be a beginning." The next day, Robert arrived at the house with a bag of cement. He slung it over his shoulder and said, "If we're going to build something new, I'll start with the walls." Arthur brought blueprints. Estelle offered what was left of her savings. Donnie, the baker, donated paint. Mrs. Johnson, chairs. The neighbours, tools. No one asked for anything. Everyone gave. Lucy, standing at the entrance, hung a handmade sign. "Catherine's house under repair. No one is denied entry here anymore." And when she put down the hammer, she felt her grandmother stroking her shoulder. She didn't see her, but she felt her. And she knew, without needing an explanation, that Catherine had returned, and that she never intended to leave. But one more step was still missing, the closing of everything, and the true beginning. Months passed. Mourning became memory, and memory transformed into purpose. The old house, the one that was once a reason for fights, screams, and betrayals, began to be reborn. The peeling walls were painted white, the empty rooms received new beds, and the backyard, where Catherine used to sit to watch the sunset, was filled with long tables with simple tablecloths and fresh flowers. The sign at the entrance was clear: Catherine's house, shelter for those who have nowhere else to go. The first to cross the door was an 87-year-old woman named Josephine, who had been abandoned by her son at the regional hospital. Lucy, now 17 years old and with a maturity that surprised everyone, received her with open arms. "Welcome, Josephine. No one is abandoned here." Josephine cried in silence, as if those words had healed years of loneliness. Then came Mr. Hillary, an old carpenter who slept at the bus terminal, then Mrs. Carmen, rejected by her daughters-in-law. And so, little by little, the house was filled with voices, stories, shy laughter, and forgotten songs. Thomas managed the place with patience. He was not an expert administrator, but he had inherited his mother's strength to get up every day and do what seemed impossible. Every corner of the house was a reminder of Catherine. The armchair in the living room, the rosary on the wall, the lemon tree in the backyard, everything spoke of her. Estelle supported him with the accounts, Robert with minor repairs. And although Anthony never returned, and Marla only sent flowers on the day of the opening, on the main wall hung a phrase written by Catherine herself in her notebook: "Where a mother was rejected, no one will be rejected here again." One Sunday afternoon, Lucy organized a small ceremony. She gathered all the elderly residents, neighbors, volunteers, and family who had helped with the work. In front of the house gate, she raised her voice with determination. "This house is not just a roof. It's a symbol. It's proof that love is stronger than selfishness. Last names no longer matter here, nor blood, nor inheritances. Here it only matters that no one feels forgotten again." Those present applauded, some cried, others held hands. Lucy unveiled a bronze plaque fixed next to the entrance. The afternoon sun illuminated it. It said, A mother was rejected here. Today no one else will be. That night, Thomas went out to the backyard, sat under the lemon tree, and closed his eyes. He felt the wind move the branches, and for an instant he heard Catherine's voice, clear and serene. "You did well, son. You did it as only you could do it." He opened his eyes, looked at the starry sky, and replied in a low voice, "Thank you, Mum. This place is yours. It always will be." And the wind, softly, seemed to nod. If you made it this far, it means you followed Catherine's story to the last breath and her eternal legacy in Catherine's house. To allow more people to hear stories like this, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, activate the notification bell, and if this story moved you, support with a super thanks. That helps us continue publishing stories that touch the heart. And to show that you made it to the end, write the word shelter in the comments. That way, I'll know you were part of this journey until the last chapter, and that Catherine's memory will live on in you too.